The light over the shallow lagoon softens into a bruised violet, melting slowly into the quiet dark of early evening. A low mist begins to unspool across the surface of the water, cool and weightless, blurring the line where the sea ends and the sky begins. You're drifting toward a city that shouldn't exist, a floating labyrinth of stone and shadow, suspended in time. Listen to the gentle, rhythmic lapping of the dark green water against the ancient brick. It is a slow, methodical sound, like the steady beating of a calm and resting heart. The wooden hulls of moored boats sway slightly in the tide, their ropes offering a soft, muted creak that echoes faintly down the narrow, winding canals. As the daylight retreats, the golden glow of wrought iron lanterns flickers to life, casting long, wavering reflections that stretch across the water like ribbons of liquid light. As we drift deeper into this floating world, you do not need to hold on to anything. You do not need to try to remember the names of the bridges, the dates of the centuries past, or the intricate details of the architecture. Let your mind soften, just as the silhouettes of the palaces soften in the twilight. Let these ideas and images drift through your awareness like leaves carried away on a slow-moving current. There is no test tomorrow. There is nothing to achieve here. If a thought captures your imagination, let it rest with you. If it slips away into the mist, let it go entirely. What stays, stays, and what fades simply makes room for deeper rest. You're safe to simply listen, to absorb the gentle warmth of these ancient stories, and to let the hypnotic rhythm of the water guide you downward into stillness. Beneath the magnificent palaces and the sprawling ornate basilicas, hidden entirely from the human eye, lies the silent secret of the city's endurance. This entire floating metropolis does not rest upon solid earth, but rather upon a vast submerged forest. Millions upon millions of wooden poles harvested centuries ago from the high alpine forests of Slovenia, Croatia and Montenegro were driven deep down into the soft submerged clay of the lagoon. In the total absence of oxygen beneath the mud, these wooden trunks could not decay. Instead, over hundreds of years, the slow, steady flow of mineral-rich water moving through the clay saturated the wood. The timber slowly petrified, turning from organic wood into a substance as hard and unyielding as solid stone. Beneath your resting body, beneath the marble floors and the cobblestone piazzas, stands an inverted, invisible forest of ancient oak, alder and larch trees, silently holding up a civilization. It is a profound reminder that the deepest and most vital foundations of our lives are often entirely unseen, working quietly in the dark to keep us supported, stable, and secure. This hidden foundation creates a physical reality that gives birth to the city's most defining and immediate sensory experience, its profound, enveloping acoustic atmosphere. This is the largest urban car-free area in all of Europe, a place where the chaotic, mechanical hum of modern combustion engines simply does not exist. When you stand in a narrow alleyway here, the soundscape is reduced entirely to the human and the natural. You hear the rhythmic, hollow echo of footsteps walking across stone bridges. You hear the low, resonant hum of distant conversations drifting from open windows. You hear the sudden, joyful flutter of pigeon wings taking flight from a marble cornice, and the deep, brassy toll of church bells marking the passage of hours. But most of all, you hear the ever-present whispering dialogue of the water. Without the roar of traffic to drown it out, the subtle, auditory textures of the world become vivid and distinct. The silence here is not empty. It is a rich, woven tapestry of gentle, living sounds that invite the mind to settle and the nervous system to finally, completely unwind. The water that creates this quiet music is never truly still. It is constantly breathing, governed by the invisible gravitational pull of the moon. Twice every day, the entire Venetian lagoon exhales, pulling water out through the narrow inlets and into the open expanse of the Adriatic Sea, revealing the damp green algae clinging to the bases of the buildings. and twice every day the lagoon inhales, bringing a fresh, oxygen-rich surge of seawater back into the winding network of canals. This tidal flushing is the vital heartbeat of the environment, a natural lunar clock that has dictated the rhythm of life here for over 1,000 years. There is something deeply comforting about this relentless, predictable cycle. No matter what occurs in the world of human affairs, the tide will reliably rise, and the tide will reliably fall, sweeping away the old and bringing in the new. It is an endless planetary respiration, a reminder that we too can simply breathe in and breathe out, trusting the natural currents of our own internal rhythms. Moving gracefully through these breathing tides are the city's most iconic silhouettes, the sleek black gondolas. But to look closely at a gondola resting in the water is to notice something beautifully unexpected. The boat is not perfectly symmetrical. The left side of the hull is built noticeably wider and curves differently than the right side. This is not a mistake of the craftsman, but a stroke of magnificent, calculated genius. Because the gondolier stands at the back of the boat, off to one side, and rows with only a single oar on the right side, a perfectly symmetrical boat would constantly veer to the left, spinning in circles. By deliberately crafting the wood to be lopsided, the master boat builders create a vessel that naturally counteracts the uneven weight and the single-sided propulsion. The asymmetry is exactly what allows the boat to glide in a perfectly straight, effortless line. It is a quiet, profound lesson in equilibrium. Sometimes, to find true balance and move forward smoothly, we do not need to be perfectly symmetrical or flawless. We just need to understand our own unique distribution of weight, embracing our beautiful irregularities to navigate the waters of our lives. The creation of these graceful boats happens in specialized, quiet boatyards. But across the water on a neighboring island, a very different kind of ancient creation takes place using fire instead of wood. On the island of Murano, glass blowers engage in a hypnotic, fluid dance with intense heat. Here, coarse, opaque sand is melted down in roaring furnaces until it becomes a glowing, liquid honey. The master craftsman gathers this molten light on the end of a long, hollow iron pipe and begins to turn it, rolling it continuously so it does not drip. With gentle, measured breaths blown down the length of the pipe, the glowing mass begins to expand, opening up like a delicate, transparent flower. What was once hard and fragmented becomes entirely fluid and responsive, shaped by breath and gravity. And then, perhaps most importantly, the newly formed glass must be placed into a special cooling oven called a layer. It cannot be brought to room temperature quickly, or the thermal shock will shatter it. It must cool down incredibly slowly, over many hours or even days, allowing the internal stresses of the material to gently resolve. It reminds us that after periods of intense heat, transformation, or effort, we too require a long, slow period of cooling down, a dedicated time of deep rest to solidify our new shapes without breaking. Just a short boat ride away from the fiery furnaces of Murano lies another island, wrapped in the soft, salty fog of the northern lagoon, where the architecture serves as a vibrant, colourful beacon. On the island of Burano, every single house is painted in a vivid, highly saturated colour: deep terracotta, brilliant mustard yellow, soft lavender, cerulean blue, and vibrant seafoam green. By local tradition, adjacent houses are never painted the same shade, while today this creates a profoundly beautiful, dreamlike landscape that delights the eye. Its original purpose was born of deep, loving necessity. In the winter months, a thick, disorienting fog often blankets the lagoon, making it nearly impossible to see. The fishermen, returning home in their small wooden boats after long freezing days on the open water, needed a way to find their bearings. The piercing, distinct colours of their specific homes cut through the dense grey fog, acting as personalised lighthouses guiding them safely back to their families. The colours are a testament to the human desire to bring our loved ones home, a visual anchor shining steadily through the obscurity of the mist, reminding us that even in the most blinding fog, there are bright, familiar markers waiting to guide us to warmth and safety. Behind these colourful facades and behind the towering, austere brick walls of the main city lies a secret emerald world entirely hidden from the casual wanderer. Venice is famously a city of water and stone, seemingly devoid of green parks or sprawling lawns, but tucked away behind high iron gates and heavy wooden doors are hundreds of secret walled gardens. These lush private courtyards are flourishing sanctuaries of life, filled with twisting wisteria vines, blooming oleander, fragrant jasmine, and ancient pomegranate trees. Because they are enclosed by tall stone walls, they possess their own microclimates, shielded from the harsh, salty winds of the Adriatic. In these hidden spaces, the air is thick with the sweet, heavy scent of blossoms, and the only sounds are the rustling of leaves and the gentle trickle of moss-covered stone fountains. They are intimate pockets of untamed nature, fiercely protected and quietly nurtured. They show us that no matter how structured, rigid, or stony our external environments may appear, we all have the capacity to cultivate beautiful hidden gardens within our own minds, private sanctuaries of peace and vibrant life that we can retreat to whenever we need to breathe and restore our spirits. The walls that protect these gardens, and indeed the edges of almost every canal in the city, are lined with a very specific luminous material known as Istrian stone. This dense, heavy limestone, quarried from the hills across the sea, is the unsung hero of the city's architecture. Unlike porous marble or crumbly brick, Istrian stone is incredibly resistant to the corrosive bite of salt water. It forms the waterproof base layer of the city, standing steadfast at the waterline, endlessly battered by the tides without yielding. But its practical strength is matched by its astonishing visual softness. Istrian stone is a pale, milky white, and it possesses a unique ability to catch and hold the ambient light. As the sun sets and the moon rises, the stone edges of the canal seem to softly glow from within, creating a pale, luminescent ribbon that outlines the waterways in the dark. It is a material that is simultaneously unyielding and highly receptive, providing iron-clad protection while graciously reflecting the softest moonlight. It teaches us the quiet strength of resilience, how we can stand firm against the eroding forces of the world while still remaining open, bright, and capable of reflecting light into the darkness. This resilience against the rising waters is a constant theme of life here, profoundly shaping how the inhabitants care for the things they love. In a famous, deeply charming bookshop nestled low on a canal, the reality of the incoming tides is met not with panic, but with gentle, pragmatic adaptation. Knowing that the water will inevitably spill over the threshold during the heavy autumn rains, the bookseller does not keep his most precious volumes on low wooden shelves. Instead, the books are lovingly stacked inside waterproof bins, raised metal scaffolding, and most famously inside a full-sized retired black gondola resting right in the middle of the room. When the high water comes, gently flooding the floor of the shop, the books simply rise with the tide. They float safely above the dampness, cradled in the curved wooden hull of the boat. It is a beautiful, peaceful surrender to the forces of nature. Rather than fighting an impossible battle against the rising sea, the solution is simply to elevate what is cherished, allowing it to softly float on the very element that threatened it. It is a profound metaphor for navigating the rising anxieties or overwhelming tides of our own lives. We do not always need to push the water back. Sometimes, we just need to place our most precious thoughts in a vessel that knows how to float, rising safely above the swell until the waters naturally recede. Watching over all of this, the floating books, the luminous stone, the hidden gardens, and the breathing tides, are the silent, resting guardians of the city, the winged lions of St. Mark. You can find them carved into the grand marble facades, cast in dark, weathering bronze, and chiselled softly into the ancient stone wellheads of quiet squares. They are majestic creatures, representing strength and divine protection, yet almost all of them share a deeply soothing characteristic. They are rarely depicted roaring or in a posture of aggressive attack. Instead, the Venetian lions are most often shown at rest, their great paws are crossed peacefully over an open book, their wings tucked softly against their backs, and their stone eyes gazing calmly out over the horizon. They are powerful, yes, but they are absolutely at peace. They exude a quiet, unshakable confidence, a vigilance that does not require tension or fear. As you sink deeper into your own rest, imagine the steady, protective presence of these sleeping lions. They are holding the watch. They are standing guard over the quiet stone and the dark water so that the city, and you, can finally surrender to the night. There is nothing left to do. The water will continue to lap gently against the wood. The mist will continue to roll over the lagoon, and you're entirely safe to let go, drifting down into a deep, uninterrupted, and peaceful sleep. As the silent winged lions hold their peaceful watch, they gaze out over the dark, sprawling expanse of the lagoon, where the safe pathways through the shallow water are marked not by harsh electric lights, but by gentle, wooden sentinels known as brickle. These are stout clusters of 3 thick oak poles, wrapped tightly in heavy iron bands and driven deep into the soft, muddy floor of the sea. For centuries they have stood quietly in the water, guiding wandering boats through the thickest winter fog. But they are much more than simple navigational markers. They are living, breathing ecosystems. Beneath the dark waterline, tiny marine organisms called shipworms slowly carve intricate lace-like tunnels through the hard oak. Over decades, the solid, unyielding wood is naturally transformed into a delicate, highly porous sculpture, shaped entirely by the gentle, relentless appetite of the sea. When the old, hollowed-out poles are finally retired, they are not discarded but cherished as naturally carved monuments of the lagoon's quiet power. It is a beautiful testament to the way nature softly reshapes the rigid structures we build into something beautifully organic, textured, and profoundly unique. As you rest here, you can allow the edges of your own thoughts to soften in the same way, trusting the natural currents to shape your mind into a place of quiet, porous ease. Drifting slowly inward from these silent wooden markers, the water leads us deep into the heart of the city's many public squares, or campi. At the centre of almost every square, bathed in the soft moonlight, sits a beautifully carved stone wellhead, a vera da pozzo. For the vast majority of its long history, surrounded by endless miles of salty, undrinkable sea, Venice possessed not a single drop of natural fresh water. To survive, the ancient architects performed an act of quiet genius, transforming the very ground beneath their feet into a miraculous hidden filter. The entire sloping cobblestone surface of each square was designed as a gentle, wide funnel. When the heavy autumn rains fell, the fresh water cascaded down the smooth stones, passing through hidden grates into a vast underground cistern, packed with thick layers of pure, fine river sand. As the rainwater slowly percolated down through the dark, quiet sand, it was naturally purified, eventually gathering in the central brick well, remaining perfectly clear, cold, and sweet. The entire city was built as a living sponge, patiently waiting to catch the gifts of the sky. It reminds us that even when we feel surrounded by elements that cannot sustain us, we can build quiet, receptive spaces within ourselves to capture, filter, and hold on to the pure, nourishing drops of peace that naturally fall into our lives. If you were to gently lift your perspective, drifting softly upward from the cool stone of the wellheads, rising high into the calm night air until the entire city spread out below you like a dark, glittering tapestry, you would notice something extraordinary about its shape. Venice was not built on a rigid grid. It was not planned by emperors with sharp geometric lines or grand sweeping avenues. Instead, viewed from the silence of the clouds, the entire main archipelago takes the unmistakable, organic shape of a giant fish swimming through the dark waters of the Adriatic Sea. Its tail fans out gently toward the east, and its curved terrestrial body is split perfectly down the middle by the sweeping reverse-S curve of the Grand Canal. This magnificent shape was never drawn on a map before it was built. It simply grew naturally, century by century, island by island, adapting seamlessly to the flow of the underwater currents and the shifting sandbanks. It is a masterpiece of unforced growth. It gently suggests that our own lives do not always need to follow a rigid, pre-planned architecture. Sometimes, by simply adapting to the currents of our environment and growing where we are naturally supported, we form a shape that is perfectly organically suited to the waters we navigate. As the magnificent shape of the city fades into the dark, your own body can grow a little heavier, sinking comfortably into whatever supports you. Your breath settles into a slow, easy rhythm, matching the gentle sway of the unseen water below. Let your mind drift back down to the surface, landing softly on the smooth white Istrian stone of one of the city's 400 curving bridges. Today, these beautiful bridges are defined by their wide, shallow steps, creating a rhythmic, percussive music as thousands of feet cross them daily. But in the early centuries of the Republic, these stone arches looked and felt entirely different. They were built completely flat, or with very gentle, smooth inclines, completely devoid of steps. This was because, long before the era of pure pedestrian travel, Venetians moved through the narrow, winding alleys on horseback. The bridges were smoothed out so that horses and wooden carts could easily glide over the water. The texture of the city's movement was characterized by the dull, rhythmic thud of hooves on cobblestone, a slower, heavier heartbeat. Over time, as the canals became the primary highways, the horses disappeared, and the architecture quietly, beautifully adapted to the human foot. It is a comforting thought. The foundational structures we rely on can always be reshaped and gently modified as our needs change, evolving seamlessly into a new era without losing their core strength. This concept of gentle, uneven adaptation is beautifully mirrored inside the great golden cavern of St. Mark's Basilica. When you step through its heavy, towering bronze doors, the air instantly cools, carrying the faint, sweet scent of ancient incense and cold marble. But as you walk forward through the dim, golden light, you will notice that the ground beneath your feet is not flat. The magnificent 12th century mosaic floor, intricately patterned with countless tiny tiles of deep red porphyry, dark green serpentine, and bright glass, undulates in slow, rolling waves. It rises and falls softly beneath your steps, perfectly mimicking the gentle swell of the lagoon just outside the walls. This was never the original design. Over nearly 1,000 years, the immense crushing weight of the marble basilica has caused the earth beneath it to settle unevenly. Rather than tearing up the priceless floor to force it back into rigid, flat perfection, the city has simply allowed the mosaics to softly bend and warp with the passage of time. The result is a stone sea, frozen in a state of eternal, gentle motion. It is perhaps the most profound lesson the city offers. True beauty often lies in surrendering to the slow, inevitable changes brought by time, allowing our foundations to softly shift and settle into their own unique rolling landscapes. As you imagine walking across those rolling stone waves, your eye might catch the glimmer of ambient light reflecting from the high, cavernous walls. This absolute mastery of light and reflection is a deeply rooted Venetian art, born across the water on the fiery island of Murano. While rough glass had been made for millennia, it was here, in the secluded, heat-soaked workshops of the Renaissance, that artisans perfected the cristallo, an entirely transparent, colourless glass. And it was here that they invented the modern mirror. Before this discovery, humanity's reflection was seen only dimly in polished bronze or dark, still pools of water. The Murano glassmakers discovered how to flatten their pure glass and coat the back with a perfectly even, incredibly thin layer of highly reflective metal. For the very first time in history, light was captured and returned with absolute flawless clarity. A Venetian mirror did not just reflect a face, it reflected the warm, flickering glow of candlelight deep into the darkest corners of grand, cavernous palaces, effectively doubling the light in the room. They teach us that sometimes our greatest purpose is not to generate our own intense roaring fire, but simply to remain clear, still and open, perfectly positioned to reflect the warmth and light of the world back into the quiet, shadowed spaces around us. There is nothing you need to hold on to right now. You can simply let these warm reflections wash over you, allowing the mind to wander freely through the halls of history, resting wherever it feels most comfortable. In this quiet, receptive state, imagine the deep, enveloping silence of a Venetian library in the early 16th century. The air is dry, filled with a dusty, comforting scent of aging parchment and worn leather bindings. Because the city was free from the roar of heavy carriages and the clatter of mainland industry, it became a sanctuary for deep, uninterrupted thought and delicate craftsmanship. It was in this acoustic haven that a man named Ottaviano Petrucci achieved something seemingly impossible. He figured out how to use the newly invented printing press not just for words, but for the complex mathematical beauty of musical notation. He printed the very first books of polyphonic music, requiring multiple, painstaking passes through the heavy iron press to perfectly align the horizontal staff lines with the delicate floating notes. His meticulous, quiet work allowed the ephemeral, invisible magic of harmony to be captured on paper and spread across the globe. It is a beautiful reminder that when we seek out quiet spaces and allow the external noise to fade, we are suddenly able to hear and ultimately capture this subtle, complex music of our own internal worlds. Just a short distance from those silent ancient archives stands a monument to a very different kind of patient measurement, the breathtaking Torre dell'Orologio, the great astronomical clock of St. Mark's Square. Unlike the frantic ticking hands of modern timepieces that seem to rush us through our days, this magnificent face of brilliant lapis lazuli and hammered gold leaf operates on a much grander, slower scale. The main dial does not have 12 hours but 24, and it features only a single golden sunburst hand. This hand moves with such imperceptible slowness that to stare at it is to see no movement at all. It does not just point to the passing hour, it glides silently through the intricate golden signs of the zodiac, tracking the incredibly slow, majestic progression of the sun and the moon through the celestial sphere. It measures time not in fleeting, anxious seconds, but in vast seasons, in shifting lunar phases, and in the deep turning wheel of the cosmos. To look up at this clock, letting the tension melt from your neck and shoulders, is to be instantly relieved of the pressure of urgency. It whispers an ancient, calming truth. The universe moves at its own unhurried pace, and we too have permission to slow down, to stop counting the frantic minutes, and to align ourselves with the deep, slow turning of the stars. If we follow the slow, sweeping path of that golden sunburst hand, tracking backward through the centuries, we eventually drift north across the calm, glassy expanse of the lagoon. Here lies the island of Torcello. Today it is a place of profound, almost overwhelming peace. Wild, golden grasses sway softly in the cool, salty breeze, and overgrown pathways lead past crumbling brick walls to a single, ancient basilica standing beautifully alone in a vast meadow. It feels like a forgotten, quiet edge of the world. Yet, this empty island is the true original birthplace of Venice. Long before the grand marble palaces of the Grand Canal were ever conceived, this is where the very first refugees settled, building a thriving, bustling metropolis. But as the centuries passed, the waters naturally shifted, the marshes encroached, and the people slowly moved away, leaving their grand beginnings to be silently reclaimed by nature. Torcello is not a place of sadness, but a beautiful sleeping monument to cycles of beginning and resting. It shows us that it is entirely natural for our centres of gravity to shift over time. What was once loud, busy, and vital can peacefully transition into a quiet, overgrown sanctuary, a place we can return to only for silence, memory, and deep, restorative rest. As you rest in the deep, grassy silence of Torcello, you can look out across the northern water, past the final scattered islands, toward the distant, hazy horizon. On clear, quiet evenings, just as the sun dips below the edge of the world, a breathtaking phenomenon known as the Enrasadera paints the sky. The distant peaks of the Dolomite Mountains, rising jagged and majestic in the north, are composed of a unique calcium and magnesium carbonate rock. In the fading light, this ancient stone catches the final lowest rays of the sun and suddenly blazes with an incredible soft radiance. The cold, grey peaks turn a deep, powdery pink, then a rich, glowing violet, and finally a cool, bruising purple, before fading entirely into the silhouette of the night. The light travels for miles across the darkening water, offering a final, colourful sigh, before the world completely turns into sleep. It is the perfect, gentle transition from the active energy of the day into the profound, enveloping stillness of the dark. As the purple light fades from the mountains and the stars begin to slowly prick through the indigo canopy above the lagoon, the water grows darker, heavier, and completely calm, preparing to carry us even deeper into the hidden, twilight wonders of this floating world. As the memory of the towering purple-hued Dolomite Mountains fades softly into the advancing night, you might be beautifully surprised to find a physical echo of those very peaks nestled quietly along a narrow, winding Venetian canal. Deep in the quiet district of Dorsoduro stands the Schiero di San Trovaso, one of the last remaining boatyards where gondolas are born, built, and carefully repaired by hand. But unlike the grand, white marble palaces and ornate brick churches that surround it, this building looks as though it was magically plucked from a high, silent alpine meadow. It is a rustic, weathered wooden cabin, built entirely of dark, sloping timber. The pitch of its roof is unusually steep, designed centuries ago to shed heavy mountain snow rather than the light, misty coastal rain of the lagoon. It was constructed by generations of skilled woodworkers who journeyed down from the vast alpine forests, bringing the comforting architecture of their homeland to the water's edge. Here, the deeply soothing scent of fresh pine shavings and warm, melted pitch mingles effortlessly with the cool, salty breeze of the sea. It is a beautiful standing anomaly. It serves as a gentle reminder that we always carry a piece of our origins with us, and that sometimes the most comforting thing we can build in an entirely new world is a quiet, familiar echo of the home we left behind. While the heavy, resin-soaked wood of these boats is shaped with saws and mallets to conquer the weight of the water, another ancient Venetian craft was born from a desire to capture the water's most delicate, fleeting moments. Far across the lagoon, on the distant, colourful island of Burano, the women of the sea perfected an art form so impossibly intricate, it almost defies belief. According to a beloved local legend, a fisherman once pulled a beautiful frozen piece of sea foam from the crashing waves, a delicate web of petrified coral given to him by a siren of the deep. Wanting to preserve this incredibly fragile beauty for her husband before it dissolved, his wife took a single, impossibly fine needle and simple white thread and meticulously began to recreate the pattern of the foam. This became the legendary foundation of Venetian needle lace, a slow, deeply meditative process requiring hundreds of hours of focused, rhythmic stitching. The most complex and revered style they developed was called punto in aria, literally translating to stitches in the air. The master lace makers built their complex geometric webs without any backing fabric at all, weaving pure, visible structure out of empty space. As your breathing falls into its own steady, rhythmic pattern, you can appreciate the profound, quiet patience of these artisans. They teach us that with enough time, focus, and gentle repetition, we can create lasting beauty out of thin air, weaving profound strength and grace from the most intangible, delicate elements of our lives. The mind, too, can sometimes feel like a delicate, complex web of floating thoughts, suspended softly in the air. But in this quiet hour, you do not need to stitch them together. You can let the threads hang beautifully loose. As the body grows a little heavier with every long exhale, sinking perfectly into the warmth beneath you, you are entirely safe to let the mind simply drift along the edges of these ancient stories, holding on to nothing at all. If you were to allow your gaze to drift lazily across the intricate facades of the palaces lining the dark canals, zooming softly in on the vast expanses of weathered centuries-old brick, you would eventually notice a silent menagerie hiding completely in plain sight. Embedded directly into the thick walls, sitting flush with the rough stone, are hundreds of circular marble medallions known as pateri. These are ancient Byzantine bas-relief carvings, most often no larger than a dinner plate, depicting a quiet, frozen world of animals and mythical beasts. Carved with remarkable softness, you might spot two peacocks drinking gracefully from a shared flowing fountain, a lone eagle suspended in mid-flight, or a resting griffin perfectly framed in a permanent circle of carved ivy leaves. These rounded stones were originally brought back by wealthy merchants from distant, months-long voyages across the eastern Mediterranean, inset into the walls of their homes as protective talismans and quiet, permanent boasts of their worldly travels. But over the centuries, as the salt air has softened their edges, they have become something more, a subtle, permanent gallery of wildlife silently watching over the winding, watery pathways. They do not demand your attention like the towering bronze statues of the grand piazzas. They simply wait, patiently and peacefully, to be noticed by a wandering eye. It is a deeply soothing realization that the world is heavily patterned with tiny, beautiful details, quiet gifts left by those who came before us, waiting patiently in the margins of our lives for the exact moment we're still enough to finally see them. Following the vertical lines of those ancient brick walls upward, moving past the heavy wooden shutters and the dark, projecting eaves, your eyes will eventually meet a skyline completely unlike any other on Earth. Reaching up toward the starry indigo canopy are thousands of Venetian chimneys, or comignoli, and across the entire sprawling city, barely any two are exactly alike. They do not look like the harsh, smoking industrial cylinders of modern, concrete cities. Instead, they blossom gracefully outward at their peaks, shaped like beautiful inverted bells, unfolding stone tulips, or vast mushroom-like caps. This highly whimsical fairy tale architecture was actually born of a deep historical fear of fire in a dense city built entirely over a wooden foundation. The beautifully flared bell-like tops were brilliantly engineered as open-air cooling chambers. As the dangerously hot smoke and burning embers rose rapidly from the hearths below, they hit the wide, expanding stone caps, swirling around endlessly inside the cool, open hollows until the sparks were completely extinguished, losing all their heat before they could safely drift down onto the neighbouring wooden rooftops. These beautiful, trumpet-shaped towers took a source of profound, intense danger and elegantly transformed it into a masterpiece of civic safety and visual art. They gently remind us that it is entirely possible to safely channel the heat and friction of our own lives, building invisible structures within ourselves that give our intense emotions the necessary space to cool, expand, and safely dissipate into the open night air. Long before the cool night air took over the city, back when the bright, piercing midday sun beat down relentlessly on the wide, white paving stones of St. Mark's Square, the ancient residents found a deeply charming communal way to stay cool. For centuries, small wooden carts selling local, inexpensive wine from the mainland vineyards would set up shop in the vast open piazza. But without the luxury of modern refrigeration, the sweet, delicate wine would quickly turn sour and warm in the baking summer heat. To brilliantly solve this, the merchants simply utilised the largest, most magnificent sundial in the world, the towering campanile, the massive brick bell tower that dominates the square. As the earth turned and the sun moved steadily across the sky, the colossal, sharp shadow of the tower slowly swept across the paving stones, like the heavy hand of a giant clock. The merchants would continuously roll their little wooden carts, inch by slow inch throughout the day, closely following the cool, moving relief of the shadow. Because of this slow, daily migration, a small, refreshing glass of wine in Venice became known, and is still warmly called today, an ombra, which translates directly to a shadow. To invite a friend for a drink is to sweetly ask them to take a shadow with you. It is a beautiful, deeply comforting linguistic relic. It honours the slow, natural cycles of planetary light and dark, suggesting that sometimes the most refreshing restorative thing we can do is simply find a cool, quiet shadow to rest in, moving gently and softly in rhythm with the turning of the world. Just as those ancient merchants constantly sought the quiet relief of the shade, you have successfully found your own perfect quiet shadow in this exact moment. The heat and noise of the day have long since dissipated into the atmosphere. There is no need to move, no need to track the sun, and absolutely no need to rush. You can simply rest in the cool, soothing calm of the night, letting the soft, heavy darkness wrap around you like a protective velvet cloak, easing the lingering tension from every muscle in your body. That same colossal brick bell tower that cast its protective, sweeping shadow over the square holds another deeply reassuring historical secret about the nature of resilience and rebirth. For over 1,000 years it stood as the proud, unshakable vertical axis of the entire floating city. But on a very quiet, still July morning in the year 1902, the unthinkable happened. Following days of a slowly widening, ominous crack appearing in its ancient brick face, the towering campanile did not violently explode outward or topple destructively onto the surrounding priceless palaces. Instead, as if finally, completely exhausted by the crushing weight of the centuries, it gracefully, almost gently collapsed straight down upon itself. It folded neatly into a massive, quiet pile of red dust in the centre of the completely empty square. Miraculously, not a single human life was lost in the breathtaking fall. The city, devastated by the loss of their greatest landmark but entirely unhurried, made a unified, peaceful and unbreakable vow: com'era, dov'era, exactly as it was, exactly where it was. Over the next 10 years, they meticulously and quietly rebuilt the tower, brick by brick exactly as it had stood, using much of the original surviving stone, but safely fortifying its hidden internal core with modern, lasting strength. When you look up at the illuminated tower today, you're not looking at an unbroken line of perfect history. You're looking at a brilliant, flawless resurrection. It offers a profound, deeply comforting promise. Even when the towering, seemingly permanent structures of our lives suddenly collapse under the heavy weight of time, they can be patiently, beautifully rebuilt. We can carefully construct ourselves again, exactly as we were, exactly where we were, only significantly stronger, wiser, and more resilient than we ever were before. From the wide, solid stone base of that resurrected tower, if you walk just a few minutes through the narrow alleys toward the sweeping, majestic curve of the Grand Canal, you will encounter a quiet, deeply communal ritual that has survived untouched for centuries. While there are only 4 grand, highly decorated bridges spanning the entire 2-mile serpentine length of the main waterway, the locals rarely take the time to walk the long, winding distances to cross them. Instead, they rely entirely on the traghetto. These are large, stripped-down, unadorned gondolas, expertly manned by not one, but 2 rowers, one standing tall at the front and one at the back. For a mere pocketful of small coins, these simple black wooden ferries glide endlessly back and forth across the deep, fast-moving green water, acting as brilliant, invisible, moving bridges. But what makes the traghetto truly unique and deeply captivating to watch is the collective posture of the passengers. There are no plush velvet seats or ornate golden carvings to rest upon here. The locals, carrying their heavy cloth bags of market groceries or softly holding the leashes of their quiet dogs, simply step onto the flat wooden floorboards of the boat and remain entirely standing. As the boat rocks, tips and sways across the unpredictable wake of passing motorboats and heavy barges, the passengers intuitively, silently bend their knees in unison. They shift their weight together in total unspoken synchronicity, absorbing the rolling motion of the water as one single collective body. It is a silent, everyday masterclass in shared fluid balance. It reveals the beautiful truth that when we are forced to cross turbulent, unpredictable or uncertain waters in our lives, we do not always need to frantically search for a solid, unmoving stone bridge. We can simply stand together, remain soft and flexible in our knees, and softly absorb the changing, rolling currents until we safely, gently reach the other side. As that dark wooden boat glides smoothly toward the algae-covered wooden docks, the ambient moonlight suddenly catches the only piece of polished, shining metal on the entire vast length of the vessel, the ferro. This is the gleaming, silver-coloured prow that curves up high and proud at the very front of every single traditional gondola in the city. To a casual, uninitiated observer standing on the shore, it simply looks like a beautiful, decorative, curving blade designed to softly cut through the low evening mist. But it is, in fact, an incredibly precise, brilliantly encoded miniature map of the entire Venetian world, cast permanently in solid steel and polished aluminum. The elegant, sweeping, forward-leaning S-curve of the main metal beam perfectly represents the twisting serpentine path of the Grand Canal itself. The 6 distinct flat metal prongs facing forward represent the 6 specific historical districts, or sestieri, of the ancient city. The single, lone prong facing backward stands softly for the large, sprawling neighbouring island of Giudecca, and the softly curved, flowing top above them all meticulously mimics the distinctive horned shape of the Doge's historic silken headpiece. Even the tiny, elegantly cut-out negative spaces between the prongs mirror the delicate half-moon arches of the city's countless stone bridges. The ferro serves a vital, deeply practical purpose, acting as a heavy, necessary counterweight to the rower standing far at the back, but it does so while proudly carrying the entire complex identity of the lagoon. It is a beautiful, deeply grounding philosophy forged in cold metal. We can successfully carry the full, complex, heavy map of our history and our identity with us, using it not as a heavy burden that sinks us, but as the very brilliant tool that balances us, keeping our heads above the water and helping us navigate smoothly, safely into the dark, unknown waters ahead. If we were to follow the quiet, winding, moonlit canals far to the northern, quietest edge of the city, gently leaving behind the gleaming silver of the gondolas and the wide, open waters, we would arrive at a secluded place completely hidden behind high, windowless brick walls. Here, the concept of colour itself is carefully archived, protected, and revered. This is the historic Orsoni furnace, the very last operating glass mosaic foundry hidden on the main island of Venice. Inside this remarkably quiet, heat-soaked sanctuary lies a room completely unlike any other space in the world, the legendary Library of Colour. There are no paper books or leather-bound scrolls on these soaring floor-to-ceiling wooden shelves. Instead, the walls are entirely lined with thousands upon thousands of heavy, rectangular slabs of solid, pure smalty glass. There are over 10,000 distinct, meticulously catalogued and perfectly formulated shades of colour resting in the quiet, dusty dark. There are hundreds of incredibly subtle variations of deep oceanic blue, a vast sweeping spectrum of mossy forest greens, and endless rows upon rows of burning fiery crimsons and soft dusty twilight pinks. every single minute hue ever required to capture the exact fleeting reflection of light on rippling water, or the precise soft shadow resting on a saint's painted robe, is held perfectly still, frozen forever in solid, glassy form. It is a breathtaking, silent monument to the depth of human perception and the profound desire to name, categorize, and preserve the incredibly subtle nuances of the visual world. It is a profound, deep comfort to the resting mind to know that such a place physically exists, a quiet, hidden, dusty library where every possible shade of light and every subtle, fleeting emotional tone is recognized, valued, and kept perfectly safe in the dark until it is needed to create a larger, beautiful, and lasting picture. As the deep, colourful slabs of glass cool slowly in the quiet darkness of the kilns, a very different kind of invisible, lingering richness begins to drift through the damp, nighttime air. Today, the soft breeze blowing off the dark lagoon smells faintly of natural sea salt, damp algae, and old, cold stone. But for many long, thriving centuries, the very air of Venice was heavy with an intoxicating, incredibly exotic, and overwhelmingly rich perfume. Because this floating city served as the sole, vital gateway between the vast, mysterious empires of the East and the wealthy kingdoms of Europe, it was the primary, bustling entry point for the world's most precious, highly prized, and fiercely guarded organic treasures. Exotic spices. Enormous creaking wooden ships arrived daily, carrying towering heavy burlap sacks of rough biting black pepper, sweet tightly curling bark of brown cinnamon, dried aromatic cloves, and incredibly precious golden threads of delicate saffron. The air wrapping around the bustling Rialto markets was a dense, invisible, and deeply warming cloud of grated nutmeg and sharp ginger, a scent so intensely rich, warm, and entirely unfamiliar that it literally seemed like pure magic to the sheltered people of the mainland. This profound, continuous collision of global warming aromas led the clever Venetian alchemist to pioneer the modern, delicate art of perfumery, learning exactly how to extract the essential, floating, fragrant souls of these exotic plants and softly bind them with pure, clear spirits. The very breath of the ancient city was a living testament to connection, a grand, invisible meeting place of completely distant worlds, all carried softly on the wind. As you lie here in the dark, taking a slow, deep, and settling breath, you can almost vividly imagine those ancient, warming, golden scents mingling effortlessly with the cool, refreshing sea air. They whisper softly of distant, magical lands and incredibly safe, long-awaited arrivals, of long, arduous, tiring journeys finally coming to a gentle end in a place of deeply protected rest, leaving only a sweet, lingering, and profound calm floating in the air as the night continues to beautifully deepen. That sweet, lingering calm left by the memory of floating spices settles gently onto the ancient worn stones of the Rialto market, where the physical wealth of that grand empire was bought, sold, and meticulously documented. At the very centre of this historic commercial heart stands a remarkably quiet, patient figure carved from solid granite, the Gobbo di Rialto, or the Hunchback of Rialto. He's not a towering king or a golden saint, but a humble, kneeling man supporting a small flight of stone steps on his back. For centuries, this small monument served as the official podium where the laws of the Republic were softly read aloud to the gathering crowds. But more profoundly, it was a designated sanctuary of physical and emotional relief. When those who had broken the law were forced to run a punishing gauntlet through the crowded market, the very moment they reached out and touched the cool, smooth granite of the kneeling hunchback, their punishment instantly ended. He was a stone vessel of absolute clemency, silently absorbing the exhaustion and fear of those who sought him. To look at him resting in the quiet shadows of the square today is to recognise a deep structural empathy built into the city's oldest stones. He reminds us that no matter how grueling the journey or how heavy the burden we currently carry, there is always a designated place to rest our hands, a quiet sanctuary where all penalties are dropped and we are finally safely allowed to stop running. While the kneeling stone man quietly absorbed the burdens of individuals, just a short distance across the labyrinth of canals lies a place that bore the immense, structural weight of the entire maritime republic. Hidden behind towering crenellated red brick walls and flanked by majestic marble lions, the Venetian arsenal stretches out over the water, a vast, silent shipyard that was once the very beating heart of the city's power. Long before the modern world ever conceived of assembly lines or industrial factories, the arsenal was a masterpiece of organised rhythmic creation. Thousands of skilled shipwrights, carpenters, and sailmakers worked in perfect, quiet synchronization along a central flowing canal. The process was so flawlessly choreographed that an entire massive wooden war galley could be built, completely outfitted, and launched into the water in a single day. Imagine the hypnotic, steady rhythm of thousands of hands working as one, the soft shaving of pine, the weaving of heavy canvas, the pouring of warm black pitch, all blending into a symphony of unified purpose. It is a stunning realization of what can be accomplished when energy is perfectly directed and shared. It suggests that even the most monumental, seemingly impossible tasks in our own lives do not need to be tackled with frantic anxiety. With a steady, coordinated rhythm, and by breaking massive undertakings down into small, continuous movements, we can build magnificent vessels capable of navigating the deepest waters without ever losing our profound sense of inner calm. As you envision those grand wooden ships sliding softly from the arsenal into the open starlit lagoon, you can feel your own body growing a little heavier, sinking comfortably into the warmth beneath you, guided only by the quiet rising and falling rhythm of your deepening breath. To help those magnificent vessels find their way back home from the dark, open expanse of the Adriatic Sea, the Venetians constructed a guiding light that was as much a work of art as it was a tool of navigation. Standing tall on the neighbouring glass-making island is the Faro di Murano, a lighthouse with a brilliant, uniquely Venetian secret. Before the invention of modern electric bulbs, a simple, burning fire at the top of a stone tower was often too weak to pierce the thick coastal fog. But the glass masters of Murano had a breathtaking solution. They surrounded the massive lantern fire with an intricate, precisely angled array of their flawless, newly invented crystal mirrors. These pure, reflective surfaces captured the dancing flames, magnifying and multiplying the ambient light until it formed a single, powerful beam that could be seen from miles away across the black water. It was a beautiful collaboration between the fierce heat of the fire and the cool, flawless clarity of the glass. It teaches us a soft, illuminating truth. We do not always need to burn brighter or exhaust ourselves to be seen in the dark. Sometimes, by simply polishing our own internal mirrors, our clarity, our stillness, our quiet awareness, we can magnify the light we already have, gently guiding ourselves safely back to the shore. The light from that distant tower sweeps softly over the calm surface of the water, catching the edges of the narrow, winding canals that thread their way through the city's dense interior. Moving smoothly through these dark, watery alleyways requires a different kind of navigation, one not based on sight, but on the delicate geometry of sound. Because the tall, brick palaces rise straight out of the water, many of the canal intersections are completely blind corners. Rather than relying on harsh, alarming horns or sudden, jarring stops, the gondoliers developed a deeply melodic, ancient system of vocal calls. As a long black boat silently approaches a tight, invisible bend, the rower leans forward and lets out a long, resonant musical cry, pitching their voice to carry perfectly over the specific acoustics of the water and the stone. The tone is never urgent. It is a soft, echoing announcement of presence. If another boat is approaching from the opposite, unseen direction, An answering harmonious call echoes back through the dark. It is a beautiful, invisible handshake across the stone walls, a system of mutual care and gentle awareness. It reminds us that navigating the blind corners of our own lives does not require fear or hesitation. We simply need to send out a clear, honest signal of our presence, trusting that the world will hear our song, answer back, and help us glide smoothly through the unknown without collision. As that melodic voice echoes and slowly fades against the towering walls of the canals, you might notice that the grand facades of these palaces possess a texture that seems to softly absorb the sound. While they appear to be built entirely of massive heavy slabs of solid white marble, this is actually a beautiful, necessary illusion. The ancient architects knew that driving millions of wooden poles into the soft mud of the lagoon could never support the crushing, immense weight of a city made entirely of stone. Instead, they invented a magnificent lightweight alternative known as marmarino. By carefully collecting the fine, powdery dust left over from stone carvers and mixing it with pure slaked lime, they created a brilliant plaster that could be smoothed effortlessly over light brick. Once dried and polished with hot irons and natural beeswax, it became completely indistinguishable from solid marble, shimmering with the same milky, luminous depth in the moonlight. But unlike solid stone, marmarino is miraculously porous. It beautifully breathes. It allows the relentless, salty moisture rising from the lagoon to pass directly through the walls without trapping the dampness or destroying the structure from the inside out. It is a breathtaking masterpiece of adaptation. It shows us that true resilience is not always about being the heaviest, most solid, or most impenetrable force in the room. Sometimes, the most enduring strength comes from remaining light, flexible and porous, allowing the atmosphere to gently pass through us while still presenting a smooth, beautiful face to the world. Just as those breathing walls allow the moisture to safely pass through, you can allow any lingering thoughts of the day to simply evaporate, passing out of your mind with every slow, descending breath. There is absolutely nothing you need to hold on to right now. Let your attention rest softly on the delicate shapes carved into that luminous plaster. The most defining romantic feature of Venetian architecture is the graceful curve of its windows, formerly known as the ogee arch. Unlike the sturdy, perfectly round Roman arches or the sharp, towering peaks of northern Gothic cathedrals, the top of a Venetian window curves elegantly inward and then softly outward, meeting at a delicate floating point. The shape beautifully mimics the natural moving world, the soft crest of an ocean wave just before it breaks, or the flickering, dancing tip of a resting candle flame. By choosing this specific fluid geometry, the architects deliberately pulled the organic movement of the water directly up into the rigid, stationary stone. The buildings themselves seem to gently ripple and flow, perfectly softening the hard, vertical lines of the city. It is a visual lullaby, a flawless blending of the permanent and the shifting. It whispers the comforting idea that the structures we build for ourselves, our routines, our boundaries, our homes, do not need to be harsh or perfectly rigid to keep us secure. They can possess the soft, graceful curves of water, beautifully yielding to the elements while continuing to shelter us in total, unshakable safety. Resting quietly beneath these elegant flowing windows, standing guard outside the towering iron gates of the Grand Arsenal, is a silent watcher with a history that spans continents and centuries. This is the Piraeus lion, a massive, imposing statue carved from pure white Greek marble. For over 1,000 years it sat peacefully in the ancient harbour of Athens, watching the sun rise and fall over the Aegean Sea before it was eventually brought to the Venetian lagoon as a prize of history. But if you drift close enough to examine the smooth, resting flanks of this ancient beast in the dim starlight, you will discover a completely unexpected hidden story etched directly into its stone skin. Carved deeply into the lion's shoulders is a long, winding line of ancient runic graffiti. It was inscribed by elite Viking mercenaries who had travelled thousands of miles from the frozen fjords of Scandinavia to serve in the Mediterranean, leaving their permanent quiet mark on the Greek marble before it ever found its way to Italy. This single, resting statue is an astonishing tapestry of intersecting journeys. Greek carvers, Norse wanderers and Venetian sailors, all united in one silent sleeping form. It is a profound comfort to realise that the world is endlessly interconnected, that deeply disparate pieces of history can drift across vast oceans and centuries, finally coming to rest together in perfect, beautiful stillness on the quiet shores of the lagoon. The image of the lion is woven deeply into the very fabric of the city, not just as grand marble statues, but as subtle, quiet features hidden within the shadowy porticos of the ancient palaces. Scattered throughout the quietest corners of the city, carved directly into the stone walls, are the Bosche dei Leoni, or the lions' mouths. These are small, beautifully sculpted stone faces of lions, their jaws open wide, revealing a dark, narrow slit leading into the interior of the building. In the era of the Republic, these were used as secretive letterboxes, a place where citizens could slip anonymous notes directly to the magistrates. While history often frames them as tools of political intrigue, their physical presence offers a much more relaxing psychological metaphor. They are literal, stone vessels designed to swallow the worries, the secrets, and the heavy burdens of the people. Imagine walking through the cool night air, carrying a heavy thought that has troubled you all day and simply sliding it into the silent waiting mouth of the stone lion. The moment it slips from your fingers into the dark, it is completely out of your hands. The weight is officially transferred, safely held by the thick stone walls of the city. We all deserve a quiet place to deposit the things that are too heavy to carry, trusting that once we let them go, they are absorbed by the vast, patient silence of the night, leaving us delightfully empty, light, and ready for deep rest. As the weight of those thoughts vanishes into the dark stone, your mind can gently return to the soothing rhythmic movement of the water that binds this entire world together. The water filling the canals is not the deep, transparent blue of the open ocean, nor is it merely a reflection of the sky. It possesses a highly specific, mesmerizing colour that painters have spent centuries attempting to perfectly capture on canvas, a shade simply known as Venetian green, or verde laguna. This profound, opaque colour is born of a beautiful, complex mixture of the natural elements. It is the soft, sandy clay of the shallow seafloor blending with the microscopic, blooming green algae, all illuminated by the scattered golden light bouncing off the ancient brick walls. Because the water is not perfectly clear, it acts almost like a smooth liquid mirror, capturing the rippling reflections of the passing clouds and the illuminated windows with stunning dreamlike intensity. The opacity of the green water gently hides the deep submerged foundations of the city, keeping its structural secrets beautifully safe beneath the surface. It is a gentle reminder that we do not always need perfect crystal clarity to experience profound beauty. Sometimes it is the beautiful, complex mingling of our experiences, the slightly opaque hidden depths of our minds that create the most stunning, reflective surfaces, holding the light of our lives in ways that a perfectly clear, empty vessel never could. The rippling reflections of that green water dance softly across the white stone steps of a church situated beautifully along the grand waterfront promenade. This is the Chiesa della Pietà, a building that houses a secret, invisible architecture dedicated entirely to the soothing power of sound. Centuries ago, this church was attached to an orphanage that raised the abandoned daughters of the city, teaching them to play violins, cellos, and lutes with such astonishing mastery that kings and nobles travelled from across Europe just to hear them perform in the dim light. But the true marvel is the building itself. The architect designed the interior of the church not like a traditional echoing cathedral, but specifically like the hollow, resonating sound box of a giant wooden stringed instrument. The floor plan forms a perfect, soft ellipse. The ceiling is gently vaulted, and the walls are cleverly lined with hollow wooden spaces and decorative grilles that perfectly absorb harsh echoes while enriching the warm, lower tones of the cellos. The orphans would play completely hidden from view in the high screened galleries, allowing the pure, flawless music to seemingly float down from the air itself, filling the perfectly tuned room with a warm, enveloping acoustic embrace. The very stones and wood of the building were engineered to softly nurture and amplify harmony. As you drift closer to the deepest levels of sleep, imagine your own mind becoming like this beautifully shaped, quiet room, a sanctuary where the harsh, clattering noises of the outside world are completely absorbed, and only the soft, harmonious, and deeply comforting vibrations of peace are allowed to echo, wrapping around you like a heavy velvet blanket as the long, beautiful night stretches on. As that velvet blanket of sound settles deeper into the sleeping city, the physical instruments that move through this quiet world begin to mirror that same profound dedication to harmony. Consider the magnificent sculptural piece of wood that the gondolier uses to rest his single oar. It is called the forecolor. It is not a standardized, factory-made piece of hardware. Each one is a totally unique, highly complex work of organic art, hand-carved from a single, seasoned block of solid walnut. The master carver does not use a universal template. Instead, they measure the exact height, the specific wingspan, the shoulder width, and the natural rowing posture of the individual gondolier. The wood is then slowly, meticulously shaved and sanded into a series of smooth, twisting crotches and sweeping curves, designed to seamlessly hold the heavy wooden oar in 8 different resting positions for various speeds and maneuvers. The tool is entirely shaped to honour the human body that uses it. It is a beautiful, deeply comforting reversal of the way we usually interact with the world. We do not always need to contort ourselves to fit the rigid tools we're given. When a tool is crafted with patience and deep observation, it can be shaped to perfectly accommodate our unique weight, our specific reach, and our natural way of moving through the waters of our lives. The boat that carries this magnificent carving is instantly recognizable by its impossibly sleek, uniform black silhouette against the night water. Yet, in the early days of the Maritime Republic, these boats were riotous explosions of colour. Wealthy nobles competed fiercely, draping their vessels in heavy crimson velvets, brilliant silks and blinding gold leaf, turning the canals into a chaotic, stressful theatre of wealth and pride. To quiet this exhausting visual noise, the Senate passed a sweeping sumptuary law, gently mandating that every single passenger gondola, regardless of the owner's immense wealth, must be painted uniformly in pitch black, using a special, waterproofing resin. Instead of feeling like a harsh restriction, this law birthed a profound, levelling elegance. Stripping away the frantic need to constantly outshine one another, left the city with a breathtaking visual harmony. The dark, glossy hulls now glide through the water like graceful, identical shadows, allowing the permanent beauty of the architecture and the soft light of the moon to take centre stage. It is a gentle reminder that releasing the exhausting desire to compete or perform often reveals a much deeper, quieter, and more enduring elegance hidden just beneath the surface. Moving with that same silent, effortless grace through the winding, moonlit alleyways are the city's most ancient, fiercely protected nocturnal guardians. Venice has always been a city of cats. Centuries ago, when merchant galleys returned from distant, exotic ports, carrying holds full of priceless silks, fragile illuminated manuscripts and sacks of grain, they also brought back these quiet, watchful felines to protect their vital cargo from mice. Once on land, the cats were not treated as mere strays, but as highly respected essential citizens of the Republic. They became the beloved protectors of the great libraries, roaming freely through the dusty archives of state secrets, silently keeping the paper histories entirely safe from ruin. Even today, the descendants of these maritime travellers sun themselves on ancient marble wellheads, and sleep peacefully in the shadowed doorways of grand churches, completely unfazed by the world around them. As you picture their slow, rhythmic breathing curled into perfect soft circles of warmth, you can feel your own body mirroring their profound ease. The muscles in your shoulders soften. Your breath settles into a deep, untroubled cadence. You're perfectly safe to simply rest, knowing there are quiet, unseen guardians tending to the margins of the night. If you were to softly follow one of these quiet guardians as it slips away from the moonlight, it might lead you into one of the city's most unique, enveloping architectural spaces, the Sottoportego. In a densely packed island where every single inch of land is unspeakably precious, the ancient builders could not afford to leave wide, open avenues. Instead, they literally carved public walkways directly through the ground floors of their own private homes. A Sottoportego is a dark, covered tunnel that suddenly plunges you beneath heavy wooden beams and thick brick ceilings, carrying you from one sunlit square safely through to the next. The true magic of these spaces is completely acoustic and atmospheric. If you are ever caught in a sudden drumming coastal rainstorm, stepping into a Sottoportego provides an instant startling sanctuary. The loud hiss of the rain entirely vanishes, replaced by a profound, dry hush and the incredibly soft, comforting echo of your own slow footsteps. They are sudden pockets of total shelter seamlessly woven into the everyday journey. They whisper the deeply reassuring truth that even when the path ahead seems overwhelming or exposed to the elements, there are always hidden, covered sanctuaries waiting just around the corner, ready to offer a sudden, quiet relief. Emerging from the dark, quiet echo of that tunnel, you might find yourself standing before a bridge that looks entirely unlike the others. Tucked away in the quiet northern Cannaregio district is the Ponte di Chiodo, an ancient sweeping arch of weathered brick and pale stone. What makes this bridge so breathtaking is not what is there, but what is beautifully missing. It has absolutely no sidewalls, no handrails, and no parapets. It is simply a bare, elegant ribbon of stone draped softly over the dark green water. In the earliest centuries of the city, almost every single bridge in Venice looked exactly like this, built purely for function and unhindered movement. To cross it today in the quiet dark requires a gentle, mindful presence. You cannot lean heavily against a railing. You must trust your own internal sense of balance, placing each foot with quiet, slow intention. It is a beautiful physical metaphor for walking through times of transition in our own lives. We do not always need high walls or rigid guardrails to cross safely over deep waters. By simply centering ourselves, keeping our eyes gently on the other side, and moving with slow, trusting intention, we can navigate the most exposed, delicate passages with perfect, breathtaking grace. Drifting smoothly away from the heavy stone of those main islands, a small boat can carry you across the glassy southern lagoon to a place completely dedicated to patience, preservation, and perfume. This is San Lazzaro degli Armeni, a peaceful monastery surrounded by tall cypress trees and the gentle lapping of the tide. For over 300 years, the Armenian monks who live here have cultivated one of the most magnificent hidden gardens in all of Europe. Tucked behind the thick monastery walls are thousands upon thousands of blooming rose bushes. In the incredibly quiet, misty hours just before dawn, before the heat of the sun can evaporate the essential oils, the monks move silently through the damp grass, hand-picking the softest, most fragrant petals. They then slowly boil these delicate blossoms in vast copper pots with pure sugar and water, creating vartanush, a legendary, deeply aromatic rose petal jam. This slow, monastic process takes the most fleeting, fragile beauty of the spring, a flower that lives for only a few days, and carefully distills it into a rich, sweet permanence that can be savoured through the darkest, coldest winters. As the mind softens, you can let go of the need to constantly produce or move forward, simply resting in this profound lesson. When we take the time to softly notice and preserve the small, fragrant joys of our days, we create a deep reservoir of sweetness to sustain us whenever we need it most. Just as those patient monks coax sweetness from the delicate rose, a beautifully resilient vineyard hidden on the northern island of Mazorbo coaxes pure liquid gold from the harsh, salty earth. Enclosed entirely by ancient medieval brick walls lies the secret vineyard of Venice. Here grows the legendary Dorona grape, a rare golden fruit that was beloved by the ancient doges, but thought to be completely extinct after a massive flood wiped out the coastal farms. Decades ago, a few surviving wild vines were miraculously discovered hiding in the overgrown, neglected corners of the lagoon. These incredibly resilient plants had done something practically impossible. They had slowly, quietly adapted their root systems to thrive in highly saline, muddy water that would instantly kill any normal vine. The wine they produce is completely unique, carrying the faint, beautiful taste of sea salt mixed with honey and ripe apricot. It is a stunning, living testament to the power of slow adaptation. The mind can simply drift on this comforting thought. Even when we find ourselves planted in environments that feel harsh, overwhelming, or completely unsuited to our nature, we possess a profound innate ability to adapt, to dig our roots differently, and to eventually produce something incredibly rare and beautiful from the very challenges that surround us. The rich, luminous gold of that rare wine finds its perfect architectural reflection, shimmering on the surface of the Grand Canal, mirrored in the breathtaking facade of the Ca d'Oro, the House of Gold. This magnificent 15th century palace is the ultimate triumph of Venetian Gothic design. The heavy, solid marble facing the water has been carved, drilled, and sculpted by master stonemasons until it no longer looks like stone at all. It resembles a delicate, weightless curtain of pure woven lace, full of intricate floating clover leaves, slender, twisting columns, and vast open spaces that let the cool sea breeze pass directly through the building. The architects took the heaviest, most unyielding material available, and painstakingly removed everything that was unnecessary, leaving behind only the most beautiful structural essence. It is an awe-inspiring visual trick, making hundreds of tons of solid rock appear as light and airy as sea foam resting on the water. It gently reminds us that we have the power to do the exact same thing with the heavy, unyielding burdens or responsibilities we carry. By patiently working with them, carving away the unnecessary anxieties, and letting the air flow softly through the spaces in between, we can transform an overwhelming weight into something incredibly graceful, deeply admired, and surprisingly light to bear. The intricate, delicate beauty of that carved stone lace is perfectly balanced by the deep, heavy, resonant voice that sweeps over it from the high towers. Of all the great bells hanging in the colossal campanile of St. Mark's, only one survived the catastrophic, dusty collapse of the tower in 1902. It is the largest and oldest of them all, a massive bronze bell named the Marangona. Centuries ago, its specific duty was not to call the wealthy to prayer, but to govern the working heart of the city. Its deep, reverberating tones signalled the beginning and the end of the workday for the Marangoni, the highly skilled carpenters building the great wooden ships in the arsenal. When its massive iron clapper struck the bronze, a profound, rich E-flat hum rolled out over the entire lagoon, a sound so physically thick it could be felt vibrating softly in the floorboards of the houses. It served as a great acoustic blanket, wrapping the entire bustling population in a single shared rhythm. To hear that same ancient bell tolling today is to be instantly connected to an unbroken line of history, a deep, resonant frequency that survived a massive fall to continue singing. It teaches us that at our very core, we all possess a deep, resonant strength, a true note that survives our greatest collapses, waiting patiently in the dust to be raised up and ring out clearly once again. As the deep, vibrating hum of the great bronze bell slowly fades out, rolling past the grand palaces, past the quiet boatyards, and past the hidden gardens, it finally reaches the very edges of the world. Here, where the water grows impossibly shallow and the heavy stone structures finally cease, lie the barren, the vast, shifting, silent salt marshes of the lagoon. For most of the year, these low-lying mud banks are a quiet, unassuming expanse of dark green and brown, submerged entirely by the high tides and exposed again in the low. But for a few fleeting, magical weeks in the late summer, an astonishing transformation occurs. Millions of tiny, salt-resistant plants known as lemonium or sea lavender suddenly burst into bloom simultaneously. The dark, muddy edges of the lagoon are instantly blanketed in a sweeping, misty aura of brilliant, powdery purple. Because these flowers grow so low to the water, the entire surface of the sea appears to be softly glowing with a delicate violet light, blending perfectly with the hazy twilight sky. It is a masterpiece of quiet, unexpected flourishing in the most marginal, uncertain spaces. As you drift further down into a place of absolute peace, nothing needs to be held too tightly. You can simply rest in the image of those endless purple fields, trusting that even in the shifting, unmapped and quietest edges of our lives, there is always the potential for a sudden, breathtaking and entirely natural bloom. The violet glow of the sea lavender begins to dissolve into the deep velvet indigo of the night, leaving the shifting marshes behind as we drift back toward the labyrinth of the city's stone heart. In this quiet transition, where the wild lagoon meets the structured world of men, you may notice that the very ground beneath you feels different. In many of the smaller, tucked-away squares, or campielli, the paving is not made of the modern, flat grey trachyte you see in the grand piazzas. Instead, your feet rest upon ancient, hand-fired red bricks, laid meticulously in a rhythmic, interlocking herringbone pattern known as spina di pesce, or fishbone. This was the city's original skin, a warm, earthen texture that once covered every walkway. These bricks were designed to breathe, allowing the ground to shift slightly without cracking, absorbing the vibration of 1,000 years of quiet footsteps. Over the centuries, the edges of these bricks have been softly rounded and buffed by the passage of millions of soft-soled shoes, creating a surface as smooth as polished silk. To walk upon them, or even to simply imagine the soles of your feet resting against their cool, earthen warmth, is to feel a profound sense of connection to the ancient, steady rhythm of the earth. They remind us that even the most humble materials, when laid with care and allowed to weather the elements with patience, become a source of enduring tactile comfort and quiet beauty. As the warmth of the red brick gives way to the cooler, pale shadows of a narrow alleyway, the mind can follow a different kind of thread, one that winds through the very fabric of Venetian identity. Long before the city was a museum of stone, it was a world of shimmering woven light. Deep in the Santa Croce district, there is a hidden family-run workshop where the rhythmic, percussive clatter of 18th century wooden looms still provides a steady heartbeat for the neighbourhood. This is the home of Venetian velvet, or soprarizo. To create this incredibly dense three-dimensional fabric, two master weavers must work in perfect slow-motion harmony, hand-throwing wooden shuttles back and forth to interlace thousands of impossibly fine silk threads. The overcurl technique creates a texture that is both cut and uncut, resulting in a fabric that changes colour and depth depending on how the light hits it, turning from a deep bruised plum to a shimmering pale lilac as you move past it. It takes an entire day of focused, quiet labour to produce just a few inches of this precious material. It is a masterpiece of slow time. It teaches us that the most luxurious and enduring comforts in our lives are often those that cannot be rushed. By weaving our days with patience and attention to the smallest threads, we create a life that possesses a rich, varied texture, capable of catching the light in 1,000 beautiful and unexpected ways. This sense of slow, deliberate creation is a balm for the spirit, allowing the breath to deepen even further. You do not need to keep track of the time or the distance. The world outside the lagoon is moving at a frantic pace, but here, inside the quiet circle of the water, the only clock that matters is the slow, rhythmic pulse of the tide. The body grows heavier, the mind grows lighter, and you are perfectly safe to let the details of the world simply wash over you, like a gentle wave receding from the shore. If we follow the shimmer of that silk velvet back to the grand marble-lined halls where it was once proudly displayed, we find ourselves standing before a feature of Venetian palaces that seems to defy the very laws of physics. Because the city rests on such a delicate shifting foundation, the architects could not build heavy internal stone walls to support the upper floors. Instead, they invented a magnificent flexible solution, the portego. This is a vast T-shaped central hall that runs the entire depth of the palace, from the water gate at the front to the garden gate at the back. Rather than being divided by thick masonry, the space is held open by slender, elegant wooden beams and lightweight partitions. This structural choice allowed the sea breeze to blow completely through the house, naturally cooling the rooms and carrying the scent of salt and jasmine into every corner. But more importantly, it made the entire building elastic. During the rare tremors of the earth or the slow settling of the wooden piles below, a Venetian palace does not snap or crumble. It subtly bends. It sways like a great ship on the ocean, absorbing the movement through its flexible wooden skeleton. It is a profound architectural philosophy that true durability does not come from being rigid and unyielding, but from being open, airy, and willing to move with the forces that act upon us. This lightness of spirit is mirrored in the very way the city names its streets, or cal. In any other city in the world, a street name is a fixed, official label, often commemorating a distant war or a long-forgotten politician. But in Venice, the names are a quiet, evocative map of the senses and the everyday soul of the neighbourhood. You might find yourself wandering down the street of the curly-haired lady, the alley of the silent monkey, or the bridge of the honest woman. Some streets are named after the specific scents that once filled them, like the Calle del Spezier, the street of the spice cellar, while others are named for the way the sunlight hits a particular corner at noon. These names were not imposed from above. They grew organically from the stories, the sights, and the shared memories of the people who lived there. They turn the act of navigation into an act of storytelling. It reminds us that our own personal geographies, the paths we take through our memories and our days, don't need to be formal or rigid. We can name our experiences by the way they felt, the way they smelled, or the small, beautiful details that caught our eye, turning the map of our lives into a rich, living poem of quiet observation. If we follow the Calle del Paradiso, a street whose name alone promises a peaceful destination, we arrive at a small triangular square where the architecture performs a silent protective miracle. Spanning high above the narrow alleyway is a magnificent 15th century stone archway that connects two facing palaces. At the very peak of the arch sits a carved marble canopy sheltering a figure of the Madonna, whose great stone cloak spreads out wide and heavy to either side. This is not just a decorative element. The wide, sloping wings of the stone cloak were brilliantly designed to act as a permanent architectural umbrella. For over 500 years, this marble garment has diverted the pouring rain away from the delicate wooden doorways and the decorative plasterwork of the street below, keeping the path beneath it perpetually dry and sheltered. It is a beautiful, tactile representation of the concept of shelter. It suggests that even the most solid and imposing structures can be shaped into an expression of tenderness and care. Just as the stone cloak protects the alleyway from the storm, you can imagine a similar quiet canopy of peace spreading over your own mind, diverting the noise and the pressures of the external world and keeping the path to your rest dry, calm, and perfectly clear. The stillness of that sheltered alleyway is occasionally punctuated by a sound that is as quintessentially Venetian as the lapping of the water, the soft rhythmic clicking of a marangon or a master carpenter at work in a small ground floor shop. But these craftsmen are not building furniture or boats. They're creating the city's most beloved whimsical inhabitants, the wooden puppets and marionettes. In Venice, puppetry was never just for children. It was a sophisticated adult art form that allowed the citizens to play with different identities behind the safety of a stage. Each puppet is hand-carved from light, seasoned lime wood, then painted with such incredible detail that their faces seem to possess a flickering living spirit in the candlelight. The most remarkable part of their construction is the soul of the puppet, the intricate hidden network of strings and leather hinges that allow them to move with a fluid, human-like grace. To watch a master puppeteer is to see a lesson in the power of a gentle touch. They do not jerk or pull with force. They use the most minute, subtle movements of the fingers to create a dance of perfect equilibrium. It is a reminder that we too do not need to move through our lives with force or frantic energy. By finding our own internal strings, the quiet, hidden connections between our thoughts and our movements, we can navigate the world with a sense of play, lightness, and effortless, choreographed grace. As the wooden puppets rest on their shelves in the dark shop, their glass eyes reflecting the dim glow of a passing lantern, we can follow the light back out to the water's edge, where a much larger, more ancient form of protection stands guard. Scattered along the various entrances to the lagoon are the ottogoni, or the eight-sided forts. These are small, perfectly hexagonal artificial islands, built entirely of thick red brick and heavy white stone. From a distance, they look like lonely geometric flowers floating on the surface of the sea. They were built centuries ago as a defensive ring, but today they have been reclaimed by the quiet forces of the lagoon. Abandoned by the military, they have become lush, overgrown sanctuaries for migrating birds and wild salt grass. The heavy defensive walls that were once meant to hold cannons now hold only the nests of herons and the silence of the sea breeze. There is something deeply peaceful about a structure that has successfully transitioned from a place of vigilance and defense into a place of absolute natural sanctuary. It shows us that it is possible to let down our own guard, to allow the fortresses we have built around our hearts to be reclaimed by softer, more natural energies, transforming our need for protection into a vast open space for quiet growth and rest. That transition from vigilance to rest is the very essence of the night in Venice. You can feel it in the way the city's many statues seem to settle deeper into their niches as the moon reaches its zenith. On the facade of the church of San Zaccaria, the carved figures of saints and angels are positioned in a way that creates a unique, visual music. The architect, Mauro Carducci, used a technique called chiaroscuro, or the play of light and shadow, to give the flat stone a sense of deep, rhythmic movement. The facade is not a flat wall. It is a series of deep, curving recesses and bold, projecting ledges. In the soft, ambient light of the night, the deep shadows create a series of dark, silent notes, while the pale, moonlit stone provides the soaring, luminous melody. It is a symphony in stone that never makes a sound. To look at it is to experience a sense of perfect, frozen harmony. It teaches us that silence is not just the absence of noise, it is a structural element of beauty. By creating deep, quiet recesses in our own lives, moments of shadow and stillness, we allow the brighter, more active parts of our experience to truly shine, creating a life that is balanced, rhythmic, and profoundly harmonious. This structural harmony extends even into the way the city manages its most basic, vital resources. Deep beneath the paving stones of the many courtyards, hidden from view for centuries, were the pozzi, or the freshwater wells. But these were not just holes in the ground, they were masterpieces of communal engineering. Each well was owned and maintained by the entire neighbourhood, and the key to the iron lid was often kept by a trusted local elder. To prevent anyone from taking more than their fair share, or from wasting the precious filtered rainwater, the wells were only opened twice a day, at the tolling of a specific bell. The neighbours would gather in the quiet morning light, waiting their turn to lower their copper buckets into the cool, dark depths. It was a daily ritual of patience, equity, and shared survival. It turned the simple act of getting a drink of water into a moment of quiet social connection and mutual respect. It reminds us that our most vital resources, our energy, our time, and our peace of mind, are best managed with a sense of rhythm and communal care. When we honour the limits of our own wells, and when we treat our inner resources with the same respect and patience, we ensure that we always have a deep reservoir of calm to draw from, even in the driest of times. As the buckets were raised and the iron lids were softly closed, a profound, expectant silence would return to the square, a silence that is perfectly captured by the final, most delicate art form of the lagoon, the Venetian art of the muletto, or lace-making. While we have spoken of the needle lace of Burano, there is another style known as bobbin lace that is created through a mesmerising dance of sound. The lace-maker sits with a large cylindrical pillow on her lap, to which dozens of small turned wooden bobbins are attached by fine silk threads. As she works, her hands move with a speed and precision that is almost impossible to follow, tossing and crossing the bobbins in a continuous rhythmic flow. The sound they make is a soft, musical clack, 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 a wooden lullaby that has echoed through the island's narrow streets for generations. This music is the sound of order being created out of chaos, of 1,000 separate threads being woven into a single, magnificent and incredibly strong web of beauty. The lace-maker doesn't look at the individual threads. She trusts the rhythm of the bobbins and the memory in her fingers. It is the ultimate expression of trust in the process. As you drift toward the very edge of sleep, you can trust the rhythm of your own bobbins, the steady pulse of your heart, and the slow, musical flow of your breath, knowing that they are weaving together all the threads of your day into a single, beautiful, and perfectly finished masterpiece of rest, leaving you ready to wake in a world that is as fresh and new as a piece of untarnished white silk. The final click of the bobbins fades into the soft rhythmic lapping of the water against the hull of a moored boat, a sound that carries the mind further away from the stone streets and out toward the silent, empty spaces of the northern lagoon. Here, the water is so still and shallow that it becomes a perfect dark mirror for the stars, blurring the line between the earth and the heavens until you feel as though you are floating in the very centre of a vast indigo galaxy. In this place of absolute unmoving peace, the only thing that breaks the silence is the occasional distant call of a night heron, a sound that only serves to deepen the surrounding stillness. You are now far beyond the reach of the city's lights, far beyond the reach of its stories and its history. There is no more stone, no more brick, no more woven silk. There is only the water, the air, and the infinite starlit sky. You have reached the quietest, most protected centre of your own rest, a place where the lagoon of the mind is perfectly still, and the only current is the slow, effortless tide of your own deep restorative sleep, carrying you softly into the light of a new and peaceful dawn. As that new, pale light of dawn begins to softly touch the edges of the lagoon, the starry reflection on the water slowly gives way to the physical waking world, illuminating the very stones that support our journey. The paving stones of Venice are not ordinary concrete. They are grand, rectangular blocks of volcanic trachyte, quarried from the distant Euganean hills and brought over by heavy, slow-moving barges. If you were to walk very slowly, allowing your gaze to trace the surface of these cool grey stones, you would eventually notice delicate sweeping patterns embedded directly into the rock. These are actual, prehistoric marine fossils, ancient shells and the curling spirals of ammonites trapped forever in the volcanic ash. To walk across a Venetian piazza is to step softly across the floor of an ancient petrified ocean. The city is a masterpiece of deep time, holding the distant geological past right at the surface. It is a profoundly grounding realization. Whenever we feel unsteady or adrift in the fast currents of our modern lives, we can mentally return to the weight and permanence of these fossilized stones, remembering that the earth beneath us is ancient, patient, and incredibly strong, capable of holding our weight without effort. That sense of hidden history resting just beneath the surface continues as you wander away from the main squares and find yourself walking down an unusually wide straight street. In a city defined by incredibly narrow winding alleyways, these sudden expansive corridors feel like a physical exhale. They are known as restorative, which literally translates to filled-in rivers. Centuries ago, these broad walkways were actually deep, flowing canals. As the city evolved and the need for pedestrian pathways grew, these waterways were carefully drained, packed with earth, and paved over with heavy stone. When you walk down a restorative, you're tracing the exact curving path of a vanished river, guided entirely by the ghost of a forgotten tide. It is a beautiful, invisible layer of the city's memory. It quietly reassures us that even when the flowing, active channels of our lives dry up or change direction, they do not disappear. They are simply filled in and transformed, becoming wide, stable pathways that help us walk safely toward whatever comes next. Looking up from these transformed pathways, your eyes are drawn past the ornate Gothic windows to the very peaks of the terracotta rooftops, where a completely different kind of wooden architecture resides. These are the Altaine, delicate open-air wooden platforms perched precariously on the highest ridges of the palaces. They are not balconies protruding from the walls. They are independent, floating rafts built high into the sky, accessible only through small, hidden dormer windows. In the crowded, dense labyrinth of the city, where the shadows of the tall buildings often keep the ground in perpetual twilight, the Altaine were built as a brilliant escape upward to catch the uninterrupted sunlight and the cool passing sea breeze. Imagine climbing the final wooden steps and emerging onto one of these high platforms, feeling the sudden, vast openness of the sky wrapping around you. As you take a slow, deep breath, expanding your chest, you can feel your own perspective rising. The heavy, narrow concerns of the ground floor simply drop away, leaving you elevated, bathed in the soft, golden light of your own quiet awareness. From this elevated sanctuary, you are perfectly positioned to hear the city's most unusual, deeply considerate acoustic phenomenon. During the late autumn months, when the gravitational pull of the moon and the sweeping winds combine to push the high tides into the city, the famous Acqua Alta, the residents must be warned. But instead of relying on the harsh, terrifying wail of traditional emergency sirens, Venice uses a specially designed harmonic acoustic system. As the water begins to rise out in the lagoon, a sequence of melodic electronic chords floats softly over the rooftops. The warning is not a single note of panic, but a gentle, tiered song. The specific number of ascending notes in the melody calmly and precisely tells the locals exactly how many centimeters the water is expected to rise. It is an extraordinary translation of an environmental threat into a peaceful musical forecast. In this exact moment, as your body sinks heavier into the cushions and your mind softens, you can appreciate this beautiful philosophy. We do not need to respond to the changing tides of our lives with alarm. We can receive the signals of change as a gentle, harmonious song, calmly preparing our minds without ever losing our profound sense of inner peace. The quiet, melodic warning of the rising water is just one small detail in a city that has meticulously recorded every single moment of its existence. Tucked away in the vast, echoing cloisters of the Frari Church complex lies the Archivio di Stato, the state archives of the Venetian Republic. This is not a simple library. It is an unimaginable, sprawling labyrinth containing over 50 miles of continuous wooden shelving. Because the island city was miraculously spared from the devastating fires, sacks, and wars that destroyed the mainland capitals, this archive holds an unbroken 1,000-year-old paper memory. Millions of fragile, handwritten documents rest in the dark, from the grand, golden treaties signed by emperors down to the quiet, everyday receipts for a single silk ribbon bought by a merchant in the 14th century. The air in these halls is perfectly still, smelling faintly of old parchment and cold stone. It is deeply soothing to imagine this immense silent vault of memory. It suggests that every tiny, seemingly insignificant detail of our lives, our quietest thoughts, our smallest interactions, possesses an inherent value, worthy of being safely kept and honoured in the vast, quiet archives of the universe. Leaving the hushed silence of those endless paper-lined corridors, you might find yourself drifting toward the bustling commercial heart of the Rialto, where the nature of time itself is displayed with a beautiful, relaxing imperfection. High on the brick wall of San Giacomo di Rialto, often considered the very oldest church in the city, is a massive, vibrant, and incredibly strange mechanical clock. Unlike the modern timepieces we're accustomed to, this magnificent 15th century dial does not display 12 hours, but 24, painted in a large sweeping circle. More delightfully, it only possesses a single heavy golden hand, and the entire painted face of the clock is noticeably unapologetically off-centre. For centuries, this singular, slow-moving hand has swept lazily through the numbers, offering only a vague, general approximation of the hour rather than the frantic, ticking precision of the minute or the second. It is a stunning, public monument to a slower, more forgiving era. To look up at this grand, asymmetrical face is to be instantly granted permission to let go of strict, punishing schedules. Time does not need to be a rigid, perfectly centered cage. It can be a slow, sweeping, and beautifully imprecise journey. While that single golden hand slowly marks the passage of the afternoon, it casts a long, moving shadow over the water's edge, stretching toward the two colossal granite columns that serve as the grand ceremonial gateway to the sea. Everyone recognizes the winged lion resting proudly atop one of the pillars, but it is the figure standing quietly on the other column that holds a softer, more unexpected story. This is San Teodoro, the city's original ancient patron saint, before he was replaced by the grandeur of Saint Mark. Unlike the traditional depictions of fierce sword-wielding warriors battling terrifying monsters, the statue of Teodoro is remarkably, almost playfully calm. He stands atop a fearsome, jagged creature that is meant to be a dragon, but the sculptor carved it to look much more like a confused, resting crocodile. Teodoro does not have his spear raised in anger. His posture is completely relaxed, his weight shifted casually to one side, almost as if he is gently surfing on the back of the beast. It is a deeply comforting image of triumph. It beautifully illustrates that conquering our own internal fears or anxieties does not always require an exhausting, aggressive battle. Sometimes, true mastery is achieved simply by maintaining our balance, standing softly but firmly above the turbulence, and refusing to match the fierce energy of the storms beneath us. The concept of surviving turbulence and rising beautifully from it is perfectly embodied in a building hidden just a few winding canals away, a structure whose very name is a promise of rebirth. The Teatro La Fenice, or the Phoenix Theatre, is one of the most magnificent opera houses in the world. When you step inside its main auditorium, you are instantly swallowed by a breathtaking explosion of powder blue velvet, cascading crystal chandeliers, and impossibly intricate gold leaf. But this entire lavish interior is actually a brilliant acoustic illusion. The walls are not made of solid stone or heavy plaster. They are constructed almost entirely of hollow wood and carefully moulded papier-mâché. The architects built the theatre to function exactly like the hollow, resonating body of a giant violin, allowing the unamplified human voice to carry perfectly, with warm golden clarity, to the very highest balconies. And true to its mythical name, this delicate wooden jewel box has burned completely to the ground 3 separate times in its history, only to be meticulously rebuilt, exactly as it was each and every time. As your mind drifts in the quiet dark, letting the last remaining tension slip away, you can find profound comfort in this resilience. No matter how many times our own beautiful structures fall apart or turn to ash, we possess the incredible, innate ability to rebuild our inner sanctuaries, restoring our capacity for music and light over and over again. That flawless music inside the theatre is perfectly insulated from the powerful, unseen forces that sweep across the open lagoon just outside its doors. In Venice, the weather is not just a background event. It is a complex, living character, entirely defined by the distinct personalities of the ancient winds. The city naturally navigates by listening to the air. From the northeast blows the bora, a sharp, intensely cold and dry wind tumbling down from the high mountains. When the bora arrives, it violently sweeps the moisture from the air, leaving the sky a brilliant, piercing and crystal-clear blue, making the distant alpine peaks suddenly appear as if they are resting right on the edge of the city. Conversely, from the deep south comes the sirocco, a heavy, incredibly warm wind carrying the fine, invisible dust of the distant Sahara Desert. The sirocco brings the thick, low-hanging clouds and the high, swelling tides, wrapping the city in a soft, grey and melancholic mist. The locals do not fight these winds. They simply adjust their sails, their clothing, and their expectations to match the shifting atmosphere. It is a beautiful lesson in acceptance. We experience our own internal boras and siroccos, days of sharp, piercing clarity and days of heavy, emotional mist. By simply recognizing these invisible currents without resistance, we can allow them to naturally blow through our minds, trusting that the weather will inevitably, beautifully change. When those warm southern winds finally settle, leaving the surface of the lagoon as smooth and reflective as a sheet of polished silver, a breathtaking splash of colour reveals itself in the most remote, completely silent shallows. Far to the northern and southern extremes of the water, miles away from the rumbling boat engines and the dense crowds of the grand squares, lie the quiet, undisturbed sandbanks. Here, in the incredibly shallow, briny water, enormous flocks of wild pink flamingos have made a permanent sanctuary. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of violet and bruised apricot, hundreds of these magnificent, incredibly slender birds stand perfectly still in the mirrored water. Their bright coral pink feathers create a stunning, vibrant contrast against the dark, muddy greens of the marsh and the cool blues of the twilight. They move with an impossibly slow, deliberate grace, occasionally dipping their curved, black-tipped bills into the silt, perfectly synchronized with the absolute stillness of their environment. It is a startling, incredibly beautiful vision of exotic life thriving peacefully in the quietest, most forgotten corners of the world. As the image of those resting, rosy wings softly fades into the approaching night, your own breath synchronizes with their slow, measured movements. The world continues to quiet down, the colours softly mute into shadows, and the vast, peaceful expanse of the water opens up entirely, ready to guide you even deeper into the untouched, tranquil centre of the long, restful night. In the profound quiet that follows the fading light, the shallow waters of the northern lagoon gently pull us toward a deeply hidden, agricultural sanctuary, far removed from the marble palaces and echoing squares. This is Sant'Erasmo, the largest island in the lagoon, yet it possesses no grand monuments or sweeping stone bridges. It is entirely a place of loamy, sandy earth, wild vineyards, and slow, meticulous cultivation. For centuries, it has served as the secret orchard of the city. It is here that the farmers carefully tend to the castor, the very first dark violet bud of the lagoon artichoke. When the plant begins to fruit, the farmers perform an act of beautiful, counterintuitive care. They cleanly and softly cut away this first, most prized bud. They do not do this to harm the plant, but to liberate it. By gently removing the primary blossom, they allow the plant's vital energy to flow effortlessly outward, ensuring that the remaining branches will flourish into a vastly more abundant, magnificent harvest. It is a quiet, natural metaphor for the mind. When we consciously choose to gently release our first, most tightly held anxieties or singular obsessions, we make vital room for a much broader, richer, and more abundant sense of peace to bloom in the spaces left behind. Hovering softly above that salty, dark soil is a completely different kind of harvest, one gathered entirely from the invisible currents of the air. The bees of the lagoon are uniquely adapted travellers. They fly away from the cultivated gardens and out over the barren, the vast shifting salt marshes that we saw blanketed in the purple mist of the sea lavender. From these low-lying tidal flowers, they gather a delicate nectar that is heavily infused with the bracing mineral salt of the sea breeze. The resulting creation is known as miele di Barena, a rare golden honey that is a breathtaking masterpiece of natural contrast. It does not possess the flat, simple sweetness of mainland clover. Instead, it offers a rich, complex sweetness that is perfectly balanced by a sharp, oceanic finish. It tastes simultaneously of the blooming flower and the deep, weathering sea. It is a comforting reminder that our own most nourishing, enduring layers of character are rarely formed by only the sweet and simple moments. It is the beautiful, complex blending of our joys with the slightly weathered, salty resilience of our experiences that creates a truly rich, sustaining depth. Drifting slowly across the water from those fragrant, buzzing marshes, the horizon is suddenly punctuated by the dark, towering silhouettes of ancient cypress trees standing completely motionless against the night sky. This is San Francesco del Deserto, an island defined not by agriculture, but by total, profound silence. Given to St. Francis of Assisi over 800 years ago, it remains a secluded monastery entirely cut off from the noise of the modern world. Today, only a handful of monks and a flock of brightly coloured, slow-moving peacocks wander the damp, grassy cloisters. The air here is incredibly heavy, scented with dropped pine needles, old brick and the damp earth. It is a place of absolute withdrawal, where the only sounds are the wind moving softly through the high branches and the distant rhythmic tolling of a single iron bell. As you visualise this isolated sanctuary of trees, you can feel the muscles in your jaw completely relax, and your breath naturally deepens. You do not need to be available to the world right now. We all possess this inner island, a quiet, dark grove of ancient trees within our own minds, a place we can retreat to whenever the waters of the world become too rough, finding total safety in the deep, enveloping silence. Leaving the absolute stillness of the island, we glide back into the dense, winding stone alleys of the main city, stepping back into a time before the harsh glare of modern electric lights. In the thick, disorienting coastal fog of the Venetian winter, navigating the labyrinth of dark bridges and blind corners was once a daunting task. But the city offered a deeply comforting human solution, the Codega. These were the professional nightwalkers, men wrapped in heavy wool cloaks who could be hired to simply walk ahead of you, holding a warm, flickering oil lantern. They did not try to illuminate the entire city, nor did they rush or pull you along. They simply walked a few paces ahead, casting a soft, golden circle of light onto the cobblestones, just wide enough to illuminate the very next step, and the next. They were gentle guides through the obscurity. To imagine their quiet, steady presence is to understand a profound truth about moving through the unknown. When the future feels obscured by a heavy, impenetrable fog, we do not need to see the entire path laid out before us. We only need to find enough light to take the next single, gentle step, trusting that the light will move forward with us as we go. Sometimes, even within that warm circle of lantern light, the fog was so incredibly dense that the stone beneath their feet seemed to disappear entirely. To help the Codega and the wandering citizens find their way across the vast, wide-open expanse of St. Mark's Square, the ancient architects left a brilliant permanent map embedded directly into the earth. If you look very closely at the grey volcanic trichite paving stones, you will find tiny, brilliant white stones shaped like stars, set completely flush with the ground. In the bright, bustling daylight, they are completely overlooked, practically invisible to the thousands of walking feet. But in the deepest, thickest dark of a winter night, these smooth white stones miraculously catch the faintest glimmer of ambient moonlight or a passing lantern. They form a subtle, glowing constellation on the ground, a secret pathway designed to lead a lost traveller safely across the emptiness toward the water's edge. They offer a deeply reassuring thought. Even in our own moments of profound confusion or mental fog, there are permanent, quiet markers of truth and safety embedded deep within our foundations, waiting patiently for the dark to reveal their guiding light. Following that faint, glowing constellation across the square brings us to the water's edge, gently arriving at the foot of the Ponte della Padlia, a sweeping arch of pale stone that crosses a dark, narrow canal. Today, it is simply another beautiful, solid bridge, but its name, the Bridge of Straw, holds the memory of a wonderfully soft sensory arrival. Centuries ago, this exact spot was the designated mooring place for the massive, heavy wooden barges arriving from the mainland, piled impossibly high with mountains of golden, sweet-smelling straw. In a city made entirely of hard marble, unyielding brick, and damp wood, this incredibly soft, dry cargo was a vital luxury. It was the designated bedding for the entire Republic, harvested and brought across the water to stuff the mattresses of everyone from the poorest fishermen to the wealthiest doges. The mind delights in the sensory contrast, the cold, hard, unforgiving stone of the bridge meeting the rustling, sun-baked softness of the golden straw. It is a historical testament to the universal, deeply human need for comfort, reminding us that no matter how monumental or stony the architecture of our days might be, the ultimate goal of the journey is always to prepare a soft, warm place to finally rest. Stepping away from the memory of the straw, we move just a few paces into the cavernous, echoing entrance of the great basilica. High above the marble floors, the sweeping curved ceilings are completely blanketed in pure, glowing gold. This is the largest expanse of Byzantine glass mosaics in the world. Yet, the secret to their breathtaking, ethereal life is not their perfection, but a deliberate, masterful flaw. The ancient artisans did not lay the millions of tiny gold tiles known as tesserae, perfectly flat or flush against the plaster. With brilliant intention, they set each individual square at a slightly different uneven angle. Some tilt slightly downward, some angle to the left, and others are pressed deeply into the curve. When the soft, flickering light of a candle hits the ceiling, the varied angles catch the light sequentially, making the golden sky appear to physically ripple, dance, and breathe like a living canopy of stars. As this golden light seems to softly ripple above you, nothing needs to be held in perfect alignment. You can simply allow the mind to drift. It is a stunning visual validation that our own imperfections, our uneven edges, and the parts of us that do not sit perfectly flat are exactly what allow us to catch the light, reflecting a warmth and a dynamic beauty that pure, rigid perfection could never achieve. Dropping our gaze from the rippling golden heavens down to the cool, shadowed marble of the floor, we find another astonishing interaction with light, this one operating on a scale of massive, incredibly slow time. Inlaid perfectly straight across the coloured stones is a long, thin ribbon of polished brass known as a meridiana. It is an immense, silent solar clock. High up in the dark, cavernous wall of the church, the architects drilled a tiny, precise hole. Every single day, precisely at solar noon, a single, brilliant coin of focused sunlight pierces the gloom and touches the brass line. Because the Earth naturally tilts on its axis as it orbits the Sun, this glowing dot does not hit the same spot twice. Over the course of an entire turning year, the coin of light creeps agonizingly slowly up and down the brass line, silently marking the summer and winter solstices. It is a clock that ticks only once a day, measuring time not in frantic, anxious seconds, but in the vast, silent turning of the seasons. To visualize that slow-moving beam of light is to instantly release the pressure of daily urgency. It invites us to expand our own sense of time, aligning our breathing with the slow, majestic, and entirely unhurried orbit of the planets. If we were to follow the sun as it tracks in a slow, low arc across the winter sky, it would eventually lead us to the long, sweeping southern edge of the city, a place explicitly designed to capture warmth. This is the Zattere, a wide, straight promenade that faces directly out over the wide Giudecca Canal. Its name comes from the massive floating wooden rafts, or zattere, that originally brought heavy loads of mountain timber and sea salt to the city. In the deep, damp chill of the Venetian winter, this wide path performs a miraculous feat of passive architecture. Because it is completely unobstructed and faces due south, the pale paving stones act as a massive thermal battery, soaking up every available ray of the low golden sunlight. It creates a warm, radiant microclimate that feels completely isolated from the biting winds of the alleys. In the quiet afternoons, the locals gather here not to rush to a destination, but simply to stroll slowly, their coats unbuttoned, their faces tilted upward, absorbing the deeply sustaining heat radiating from the stone. It is a beautiful practice to mentally seek out our own zattere, those quiet, bright, unshadowed spaces within our own minds where we can gently rest, soaking up the warmth and light we need to sustain us through the colder, darker seasons of our lives. Looking out from the warm, sun-soaked stones of that promenade across the deep water, we return once more to the elemental, pulling rhythm of the sea, where life is governed entirely by the sky. In the quietest shallows of the lagoon, the ancient fishermen known as the mercanti practice a craft that requires total, absolute surrender to celestial timing. They are searching for the mesce, the highly prized soft-shell green crabs of Venice. But the fishermen cannot force this harvest. They must wait patiently for the exact, specific days of the lunar transition. During this precise phase of the moon, the crabs instinctively know it is time to shed their hard, protective armour in order to grow. They slip out of their old shells, remaining incredibly soft and vulnerable in the dark water for just a few fleeting hours before a new shell begins to harden. The mercanti do not dictate the schedule. They simply observe the moon and wait for nature to soften. It is a profound biological metaphor for our own periods of transition. True growth always requires a period of profound softness, a willingness to shed the hard, defensive shells we've built around ourselves. We must trust that it is safe to be vulnerable in the quiet, dark waters of our rest, allowing the natural planetary cycles to protect us as we slowly expand into our newly resting selves, drifting effortlessly toward the hidden, velvet depths of the night. As you drift into those velvet depths, surrendering to the quiet pull of the night, it is deeply comforting to realize that the vast, expansive waters of the Venetian lagoon are, in reality, a beautiful, incredibly protective illusion. When you look out across the dark, mirrored surface toward the distant horizon, it appears as an endless, fathomless ocean, a place of unknown depths and hidden currents. But the true nature of this aquatic world is entirely different. The average depth of this entire sprawling lagoon is scarcely more than a single metre. Beneath the dark, rippling surface, the soft, loamy sand and the thick green seagrass are always incredibly close, resting just inches out of sight. This remarkably shallow basin acts as a natural, immense cradle. It naturally calms the fierce rolling currents of the open Adriatic Sea, absorbing their energy and providing a haven of perfectly still, resting water. It is a profound physical reassurance that the mind can hold on to in the dark. Even when we feel as though we are floating on a vast, unknown and terrifyingly deep ocean in our own lives, the solid, grounding earth is often much closer to us than we realize, waiting patiently just beneath the surface to safely support our feet should we ever need to stand. Moving softly upward from the hidden sandy floor of the lagoon, our perspective rises effortlessly through the cool, misty night air, drifting all the way to the very highest, golden peak of the sleeping city. Resting lightly on the soaring pyramidal spire of St. Mark's Campanile is a colossal, brilliantly shining statue of the Archangel Gabriel. But unlike the heavy stone saints that are rigidly bolted to the facades of the churches below, this towering golden figure possesses a beautiful hidden flexibility. He is perfectly, masterfully balanced on a concealed, rotating central pivot, designed to spin smoothly and effortlessly with the absolute slightest breath of the high-altitude wind. He is a majestic, celestial weather vane. For over 500 years, the citizens have looked up to the sky to watch his slow, silent and graceful turning. When his wide, golden wings swing around to face the Grand Basilica, the entire city knows without a doubt that the warm, southern winds have arrived. He serves as a silent, moving guardian who does not rigidly fight the shifting atmospheric changes, but gracefully, peacefully yields to them, pointing the way forward. We too can find our own internal centre of gravity, allowing ourselves to pivot softly and easily with the changing winds of our circumstances, remaining perfectly balanced and unbothered, no matter which direction the air is moving. Just as that golden angel finds perfect, effortless balance high in the air, a completely different kind of brilliant artistic balance was found on the floors of the grand palaces far below. To walk slowly through the sweeping candlelit halls of an ancient Venetian home is to step onto a surface that looks exactly like a captured glittering galaxy. This is the historic art of the terrazzo veneziano. Because the floating city could never support the crushing weight of solid marble slabs, the ancient craftsmen had to be ingeniously resourceful. They carefully collected the tiny, irregular fragments and the fine, colourful dust left over from other grand sculpting projects. They mixed these discarded, irregular pieces of deep red stone, pale mother of pearl, and crushed green glass with a highly flexible paste of lime and clay, pouring it smoothly over the wooden floorboards. Once dried and polished endlessly by hand with heavy stones, the thousands of broken, disparate pieces formed a seamless, shimmering, and incredibly smooth tapestry of light and colour. It is an enduring masterpiece of resilience and reimagination. It quietly teaches us that the scattered, seemingly broken fragments of our own experiences are never useless debris. When brought together, held with care and smoothed by the slow passage of time, they can form the most beautiful, shining and incredibly resilient foundation upon which we can comfortably stand. As your mind traces the intricate, sparkling patterns of that smooth stone floor, your breathing remains incredibly steady and calm. The lingering weight of the day continues to dissolve effortlessly into the cool night air. You do not need to piece anything together right now, and you do not need to figure anything out. You can simply rest your awareness on the smooth, finished surface of this quiet hour, feeling completely supported and entirely safe. The ambient, flickering light reflecting off those polished floors often carries a very specific, deeply warming hue, a colour born from the very earth of the nearby mainland and immortalised on the canvas. In the quiet, sun-drenched studios of the Venetian Renaissance, master painters like Titian carefully ground natural iron oxides collected from the surrounding alpine foothills to create a deeply saturated, glowing pigment known as Venetian red. It is not a harsh, alarming or aggressive crimson. Rather, it is a soft, earthy and profound terracotta that seems to physically radiate the lingering, comforting heat of a late afternoon sun. The artist ingeniously used this incredibly warm, grounding colour as the primary hidden base layer for their vast, sweeping canvases, painting the cool, shadowy blues and the dark velvet blacks directly over it. Because of this hidden, warm foundation, every painting seems to softly, miraculously glow from within, perfectly capturing the tender, living warmth of human skin and the fading golden embers of a long sunset. It is a comforting thought. Even when our external world feels draped in cool shadows or heavy mists, there is a deep, warm and radiant underpainting within us, a permanent internal sunset that continuously glows from the inside out, keeping us safe and warm. As the actual sunset fades completely into the deep velvet indigo of the night, the winding, narrow streets once played host to a completely different kind of blank canvas, one that offered the profound psychological luxury of total anonymity. During the long, misty and intensely private months of the Venetian Carnival, the citizens of the Republic donned a very specific stark white mask, known universally as the bauta. Unlike the heavily decorated theatrical masks of the stage, the bauta was a brilliantly simple, starkly smooth and deliberately uniform face with a prominent jawline. This unique architectural shape allowed the wearer to eat, drink and breathe freely without ever needing to remove it, while simultaneously altering the natural acoustic resonance of their voice, turning every distinct word into a soft, unidentifiable and echoing murmur. When wrapped in the heavy, accompanying black wool cloak, the wealthiest doge and the poorest baker became entirely perfectly indistinguishable from one another. The mask was not a dark tool for deception, but a temporary highly respected sanctuary from the exhausting daily pressures of social hierarchy, reputation, and identity. It is a deeply restful, liberating concept. In the quiet, absolute solitude of your sleep tonight, you are completely free to take off every label, every title, and every single expectation you carry during the day, resting completely anonymous, unseen, and beautifully unburdened in the soft, dark cloak of the night. This peaceful, internal anonymity allows you to wander freely and lightly through the mind's eye, perhaps eventually finding your way to a sweeping bridge that offers a completely different tactile and acoustic experience than the cold, hard stone of the ancient city. The Ponte dell'Accademia is an enormous arching bridge that spans the very widest part of the Grand Canal, and it is made entirely of warm, weathered, and deeply resonant wood. When it was first constructed in the early 1930s, it was intended to be nothing more than a strictly temporary structure, a brief functional placeholder until a heavy, permanent stone bridge could be fully designed and built. But as the local citizens began to cross it day after day, they fell deeply and unexpectedly in love with its organic texture and its acoustic softness. The thick wooden planks beautifully absorbed the sharp, clattering echo of thousands of footsteps, turning the chaotic daily commute into a quiet, rhythmic and deeply soothing drumbeat, while the gentle, curving wooden arches felt naturally perfectly aligned with the flowing water below. The city quietly, collectively decided to never replace it. It stands today as a monument to the enduring beauty of things that were originally meant to be fleeting. It whispers the incredibly soothing truth that sometimes the temporary measures we put in place simply to help us cross a difficult span end up becoming the most beloved, enduring, and comforting structures in our entire lives. If you were to follow the deep, fast-moving green water flowing under that wide wooden bridge, tracking its path all the way out to the very edge of the world, where the calm, sheltered lagoon finally meets the wild, open expanse of the Adriatic Sea, you would encounter a colossal, entirely silent protector. Stretching for miles along the thin, sandy barrier islands are the Marazzi, the massive, impenetrable seawalls of Venice. They're brilliantly engineered, incredibly wide slopes built from enormous blocks of white Istrian stone, fitted closely together without any rigid mortar, so they can softly flex and breathe with the shifting earth beneath them. When the furious, towering waves of a dark winter storm roll in from the deep sea, they do not crash violently and destructively against a flat, unyielding wall. Instead, they hit the gentle, rising incline of the Marazzi and are slowly, continuously, and masterfully broken down. Their immense energy rolls harmlessly up the long, smooth stone until the wave exhausts itself, turning into a soft, whispering veil of white sea foam. It is the ultimate, magnificent expression of quiet strength. It visually shows us that we do not need to stand rigid, tense, and hard against the overwhelming, crashing waves of our lives. By simply leaning back, softening our stance, and creating a long, gentle slope of radical acceptance, we can safely absorb the very greatest impacts, effortlessly transforming turbulent, chaotic energy into a soft, harmless wash of profound peace. Within the calm, completely protected embrace of those massive sea walls, the surface of the internal lagoon becomes a perfect, dark and glassy mirror, ready to reflect the city's most elegant, entirely silent procession. On very special, exceptionally quiet nights, the still water is graced by the presence of the bison. These are incredibly long, beautifully slender and highly ornate rowboats that are used exclusively for peaceful ceremonial parades. They carry no commercial cargo, have no urgent destination, and are never, ever rushed. They are propelled entirely by the synchronized strength of 8 oarsmen, standing tall in perfect rhythmic and wordless synchronization. The boats themselves are richly, deeply carved, often shaped by master woodworkers to resemble mythical sea creatures or long gliding swans, and they are draped in heavy trailing silks that softly brush the surface of the water. As they move through the grand, echoing canals, there is absolutely no grinding sound of a mechanical engine, only the hypnotic, deeply unified swish of the long wooden oars slicing cleanly and softly through the dark green water. It is a moving physical meditation, a breathtaking display of absolute grace, patience, and unity. To simply picture the long, incredibly smooth glide of these boats in the moonlight is to feel your own pulse begin to slow down, naturally matching the effortless, sweeping rhythm of the wooden oars, pulling you further and further away from the noise of the waking shore. You're gliding now, completely untethered from the demands of the waking world. The slow, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest matches the gentle, hypnotic dip of those unseen oars. Nothing in this moment needs to be hurried. Nothing needs to be forced, and you can simply allow the dark, quiet current to carry you forward. Not all the boats that rest in these calm, moonlit waters are meant for grand, ceremonial processions. Some are completely devoted to the quiet, colourful and grounding nourishment of the everyday soul. Moored permanently along the sun-dappled stone edges of the quiet neighbourhood canals are the baci della frutta, the traditional floating vegetable markets. These wide, heavily weathered wooden boats are transformed into vibrant floating gardens right in the centre of the stone city. Under large striped canvas awnings that snap softly and rhythmically in the sea breeze, the wide wooden decks are piled impossibly high with the bright earthly treasures cultivated on the lagoon's outer islands. Baskets of vibrant dark purple artichokes, crates of incredibly bright sun-yellow lemons still attached to their dark green leaves, deep crimson tomatoes, and tied bundles of fresh, intensely fragrant basil. The heavy boat rocks gently and predictably with the passing tide, turning the simple daily act of buying basic nourishment into a calm, watery and deeply sensory ritual. The vibrant warm colours of the earth, resting so peacefully on the cool, dark green water, create a perfect, deeply harmonious contrast. It is a quiet, beautiful reminder that even in the most fluid, shifting and unpredictable environments, we can always find, gather and hold on to the bright grounding nourishment we need to safely sustain ourselves. The quiet, colourful sustenance of that floating market is endlessly watched over by the same silent, winged stone lions that guard every single corner of this floating empire. But there is a final, incredibly comforting, and easily overlooked detail to these majestic stone guardians that reveals the true foundational spirit of the ancient city. If you look very closely at the large open book resting softly beneath the heavy, relaxed paw of the lion, you will find a short permanent inscription carved deeply into the marble pages. It reads, "Pax tibi Marse," peace to you, Mark. While it is historically a traditional greeting to the city's patron saint, it functions today as a literal physical blessing of peace, broadcast endlessly to every single person who walks the narrow streets or sails the dark waters. The ancient architects did not carve harsh warnings of war or demands for strict obedience into their most prominent monuments. Instead, they chose to carve a permanent, unyielding, and totally open declaration of peace. As the night deepens around you, wrapping you in its soft weight, you can vividly imagine those ancient words echoing softly off the brick walls, travelling across the still water, and settling quietly into your own mind. Peace to you. The city itself, in all its ancient stone, carved wood, and deep water, is actively wishing you a profound, uninterrupted rest. You have successfully crossed the stone bridges, you have navigated the winding canals, and now, enveloped entirely in the quiet, historic, and incredibly safe embrace of the lagoon, you're completely free to close the book, surrender to the heavy velvet dark, and simply, beautifully sleep. Even as you rest in that heavy velvet dark, surrounded by the quiet wishes of the ancient city, the silent life of the lagoon continues to softly unfold. In centuries past, when the deep, impenetrable winter fog rolled thick and freezing off the open Adriatic Sea, the open, exposed gondolas were miraculously transformed into floating private sanctuaries through the addition of a remarkable temporary structure known as the felze. This was a small, beautifully arched wooden cabin fitted securely over the centre of the dark boat. It was draped entirely in heavy black wool or lined with rich dark velvet to completely block out the biting, salty wind. Inside this tiny, floating room, the passengers sat on plush embroidered cushions, their feet resting near a small glowing brass brazier filled with warm, slowly burning coals. The cabin featured small sliding wooden windows, adorned with delicate iron grills, allowing the riders to safely peek out at the misty passing world, or to slide the panels completely shut, sealing themselves inside a warm, perfectly private, and profoundly quiet cocoon. To imagine riding inside the fells is to understand the profound comfort of mobile sanctuary. It is a deeply soothing realization that even as we navigate the coldest, most obscure or unpredictable waters of our lives, we have the immense capacity to carry our own protected, warm and insulated spaces with us, remaining perfectly safe, comfortable and untouched by the elements swirling just outside our doors. If you were to slide open one of those small wooden windows and look up at the towering stone palaces looming like ghosts in the mist, you would notice that the glass in their grand arched frames was not the sharp, flawless sheets of modern windows. Historically, Venetian windows were filled with vetri di rullo, or bullseye glass. These were small circular discs of glass, spun entirely by hand on a long iron rod, while the glass was still incredibly hot and molten. The centrifugal force threw the liquid outward, leaving a distinct swirling ripple and a thick raised knot, the bullseye, right in the very centre of each pane. Because these round discs were fitted together in a heavy leaded web, and because the glass itself was naturally uneven and slightly tinted with pale green or soft amethyst, they did not offer a perfectly clear, stark view of the world. Instead, they beautifully bent, refracted, and distorted the light. They turned the sharp, hard edges of the stone city and the bright, piercing glare of the sun into a soft, impressionistic, and watery painting of melting colours. It is a stunning architectural validation of our own perceptions. We do not always need to see the world with harsh, perfect, and clinical clarity. Sometimes, looking through a lens that softly blurs the edges and refracts the light allows us to experience the world not as a series of sharp, demanding realities, but as a gentle, fluid, and beautifully softened dream. Behind those dappled, rippling windows, the ancient architects designed another brilliant layer of environmental control, intended to create absolute, undisturbed peace during the most intense, overwhelming heat of the year. These are the scuri, the traditional, incredibly thick interior wooden shutters found in almost every Venetian home. Unlike sheer, delicate curtains that only filter the light, these solid, heavy wooden panels are designed to be pulled completely shut and locked tight with a heavy, hand-forged iron latch. In the middle of a blinding, sweltering August afternoon, when the heat shimmers visibly over the canals and the water reflects a blinding glare onto the ceilings, closing the scurry instantly plunges a bright, overheated room into a profound, cave-like darkness. The thick wood immediately blocks both the glaring sun and the echoing, chaotic noise from the canals below, trapping the cool, retained night air inside and filling the room with the faint, comforting scent of old timber, sea salt, and natural beeswax. The transition is sudden and deeply relieving, a complete physical sensory reset. It is a beautiful, tactile reminder of the power of conscious withdrawal. Whenever the glare of the outside world becomes too intense or emotionally overwhelming, we possess the internal architecture to simply close our own heavy shutters, intentionally creating a cool, dark, and perfectly silent space within our minds where we can safely retreat, breathe, and completely restore our energy. The mind responds beautifully to this kind of quiet, chosen darkness. Your breathing slows naturally. Your body sinks a fraction of an inch deeper into the warmth beneath you, and you are entirely free to simply be, held up safely by forces you do not even need to see or understand. Far below those dark, shuttered rooms, the Grand Canal sweeps majestically under the immense soaring stone arch of the Rialto Bridge. This colossal structure of solid white Istrian stone seems to hover effortlessly over the deep water, a masterpiece of graceful, sweeping engineering that carries the weight of heavy stone shops on its back. But beneath this visible, floating elegance lies an astonishing, entirely unseen foundation. Hidden deep beneath the dark, rushing water and the soft, suffocating mud, 12,000 ancient alderwood timber piles were driven straight down into the submerged clay by hand. Placed closely together in a massive underwater forest, they perfectly distribute the staggering, crushing weight of the stone above. In the complete absence of oxygen, this wood does not rot. It slowly petrifies, turning as hard as the stone it supports. For over 400 years, in total darkness and complete unwavering silence, these invisible wooden pillars have unflinchingly held up the very heart of the city's movement. It is a staggering feat of hidden strength. It reminds us that our greatest, most elegant achievements and our moments of most profound peace are always supported by thousands of invisible, foundational acts of resilience and care that quietly hold us up without ever demanding to be seen or praised. At the base of these heavy invisible foundations, where the grand ornate marble palaces finally meet the flowing tide, you will find a deeply poetic architectural feature known as the reeve, or the water stairs. These are wide, submerged flights of stone steps leading directly from the grand entrance halls down into the dark depths of the canal. The very top steps are usually dry, bleached white by the relentless sun, and worn beautifully smooth by centuries of soft leather shoes. But as the wide steps descend downward, disappearing into the dark green water, they undergo a beautiful organic transformation. The lower steps become completely coated in a soft velvet-like layer of moss, dark green algae, and tiny clinging seashells, gently swaying with the continuous movement of the tide. The water constantly, rhythmically washes over this threshold, swirling in small, peaceful eddies, entirely blurring the strict architectural boundary between the rigid, solid reality of the land and the fluid, ever-changing nature of the sea. These stairs are a physical resting monument to transition. They beautifully illustrate the grace of embracing the spaces where different elements of our lives meet, where our structured, solid plans soften and yield, stepping gently down into the unknown, flowing currents of the world without fear, allowing the water to simply, peacefully wash over our resting feet. If you were to follow that dark green water as it flows away from the stone steps, moving outward into the vast open expanse of the salt marshes, you would discover a completely different ancient kind of navigation. Cutting through the thick waving seagrass are the gibi, an incredibly intricate capillary-like network of tiny winding waterways. Unlike the perfectly straight, deep and man-made canals of the central city, the gibi completely resist any fixed permanent map or rigid control. Because they are carved naturally by the water over the soft yielding mud, they shift, widen, and completely change their meandering course based entirely on the invisible, gravitational pulling of the moon and the daily sweeping wash of the tide. To navigate a small, flat-bottomed wooden boat through these narrow, twisting channels requires an absolute quiet surrender to the present moment, as the path that existed safely yesterday might be completely gone today, swallowed by the grass. It is a masterpiece of natural fluidity and constant unhurried change. It softly suggests that it's entirely natural and beautifully healthy to allow our own paths through life to remain unmapped and flexible, changing fluidly with the natural, shifting rhythms of our energy, trusting the water to guide us even when the way forward constantly shifts and the old paths gracefully disappear into the tide. There is no rigid map you need to follow here in the dark. You can easily let go of the steering, trusting the gentle, pulling current to guide your thoughts to exactly where they need to rest. In the quiet, sun-dappled alleyways bordering those shifting marshes, one could historically hear a remarkably soft, soothing sound drifting through the warm air, resembling the gentle, endless fall of fine sand. This was the collective rhythm of the Imperiores, the dedicated Venetian women who sat together in the cool stone shadows, stringing the conteri, millions of tiny, vibrantly coloured glass seed beads. Resting long, curved wooden trays called sessol on their laps, they would use fan-like arrays of incredibly fine long needles to scoop the tiny beads in a continuous, hypnotic and sweeping motion. Hours would pass in a state of deep communal flow, often accompanied by the soft singing of ancient folk songs, as tiny fragments of cobalt blue, emerald green, and opaque white glass were slowly, rhythmically threaded into long, shimmering and incredibly valuable hanks of colour. To imagine their hands moving in that steady, unbroken rhythm is to experience the profound, meditative peace found in gentle, repetitive motion. It teaches us the quiet, profound magic of patience, showing how stringing together thousands of tiny, seemingly insignificant and individual moments can ultimately weave a long, beautiful and unified strand of deep meaning. The immense wealth generated by these quiet, patient crafts eventually allowed the Republic to beautifully transform one of its more demanding ancient traditions into a lasting act of peaceful art. For centuries, the ruling Doge was strictly required by custom to hunt wild ducks out in the freezing open lagoon every single winter, harvesting them to present as mandatory gifts to the hundreds of noble families. As the city grew more refined, this exhausting, harsh winter practice was gently and intelligently abandoned. Instead of taking life from the lagoon, the Doge began minting the osella, a beautiful, heavy and intricately stamped silver coin, possessing a satisfying, solid weight in the palm of the hand. The word itself comes from the Venetian dialect for bird, and each year these gleaming, freshly minted coins were designed to feature the peaceful, resting image of the wild ducks, or beautiful, calm allegories of the lagoon. The tradition shifted seamlessly from a physical, demanding hunt to the gifting of a permanent, shining piece of art. It is a deeply hopeful, comforting narrative of transformation. It reminds us that we possess the beautiful, innate capacity to consciously evolve, softening our own harsh or exhausting personal traditions and replacing them with symbols of peace, creativity, and lasting, quiet value. Those beautiful silver coins might have later been exchanged in the incredibly opulent, yet deeply intimate rooms of the historic coffee houses that line the edges of St. Mark's Square. while the vast piazza outside is a theatre of grand, echoing space and brilliant light. Stepping inside a place like the legendary Café Florian offers a completely different, instantly calming acoustic environment. The interior is not one massive open hall, but a series of tiny, interconnected jewel box rooms. The walls of these small hidden alcoves are heavily lined with thick crimson velvet and adorned with softly clouded antique mirrors that gently reflect the warm glow of brass lamps. The heavy velvet material brilliantly absorbs the sharp clatter of porcelain cups and entirely muffles the chaotic, echoing noise of the square outside. It creates a hushed, insulated and deeply protected atmosphere where loud voices naturally, instinctively drop to a soft, respectful murmur. It is a space designed entirely for unhurried, quiet connection. To imagine resting back against that plush, heavy velvet is to understand the absolute necessity of creating small, insulated spaces in our own lives. Quiet, buffered rooms within our minds where the harsh noise of the world is completely absorbed, allowing us to finally hear the quietest, most intimate whispers of our own resting thoughts. The external noise has completely faded now. Only the soft, steady rhythm of your own breath remains. A quiet, internal drumbeat perfectly pacing the slow passage of the night. That steady, reliable rhythm is beautifully echoed high above those velvet-lined rooms, standing open to the starry sky on the very top terrace of the great clock tower. Here stand the Muri di Venezia, two colossal, incredibly ancient bronze figures possessing heavy iron hammers. For over 500 years, these towering statues, coated in a soft sea-green patina, have pivoted slowly at the waist to strike the massive bronze bell, faithfully marking the passing hours for the entire sleeping city. But the beautiful, hidden secret lies in the strike itself. Over 5 centuries of continuous, patient and rhythmic contact, the faces of the iron hammers and the exact striking point on the side of the bell have worn perfectly, smoothly together. The resulting chime is no longer a sharp, startling or metallic clang. Instead, it has softened into a deeply mellow, profoundly resonant and incredibly gentle toll that rolls warmly over the terracotta rooftops, vibrating softly in the air without ever alarming the residents below. It is a stunning acoustic masterpiece of deep time. It whispers the deeply comforting promise that time does not have to be a harsh, striking or urgent force. As we weather and age, the rhythms of our lives can become vastly softer, more resonant and deeply comforting, ringing out into the dark with a profound, peaceful and enduring warmth. The soft-shell crabs resting in the dark water are held closely by the deep, enveloping quiet of the night, a quiet that is often physically amplified by the lagoon's most dramatic atmospheric visitor. During the deepest, coldest stretches of the winter, a profound and heavy sea fog known as the Kygo slowly rolls in from the open Adriatic. This is not a thin, passing mist, but a dense, pearlescent cloud that descends directly onto the surface of the water, completely swallowing the towering bell towers, the grand marble palaces, and the stone bridges until the city becomes entirely formless. The true magic of the Kygo is deeply acoustic. The thick moisture suspended in the air acts as an immense natural blanket, instantly dampening the echoes of the stone alleyways and absorbing the lapping sounds of the canals. The world is suddenly reduced to a radius of just a few feet, wrapping you in a profoundly soft, muffled and entirely private sphere of existence. It is a stunning physical manifestation of the mind turning inward. When the overwhelming noise and the endless horizons of the waking world become too much to bear, we can invite our own internal mist to softly roll in, deliberately blurring the sharp edges of our thoughts and allowing us to rest in a small, beautifully quiet and perfectly protected space. Wandering slowly through that thick, protective mist, navigating the winding, softened alleyways requires a gentler kind of guidance. You will not find heavy metal signs bolted to posts here, loudly dictating the names of the streets. Instead, the directions of the city are painted softly, directly onto the plaster walls themselves. These are the nizioleti, which affectionately translates in the Venetian dialect to little sheets. They are simple, elegant rectangles of stark white paint, bordered by a thin black line with the names of the streets meticulously stenciled inside using bold black lettering. Because they are painted directly onto the stone, they organically follow the subtle curves, the small bumps, and the gentle bowing of the ancient architecture. They do not impose themselves rigidly on the environment. They become a seamless, integrated part of the very walls that guide you. It is a deeply comforting way to think about the directions and the rules we follow in our own lives. They do not need to be harsh, metallic, or rigidly imposed from the outside. Our truest guidance can be softly painted directly onto the natural organic curves of our own nature, becoming an invisible, integrated part of who we are, quietly pointing the way home without ever disrupting the structure of our peace. If you follow those painted white rectangles down a narrow fog-drenched corridor, your eyes will naturally land on the grand, incredibly heavy wooden doors that guard the entrances to the historic palaces. Resting squarely in the centre of these ancient weathered panels are the battiporta, the heavy bronze door knockers of the city. Centuries ago, before the advent of electricity or bells, arriving safely at a home required a physical, resonant announcement. These massive pieces of cast bronze were meticulously sculpted into the shapes of roaring lions, twisting dolphins, or simply elegant, heavy rings held by a beautifully modelled hand. But what is most captivating about them today is their texture. The deepest, most protruding parts of the bronze have been rubbed completely smooth and polished to a bright golden gleam by hundreds of years of human hands reaching out in the dark, seeking entry and safety. To simply imagine the cold, heavy weight of the metal resting in your palm and the deep, satisfying, resonant thud it makes against the thick wood is to feel the profound relief of arrival. It represents the beautiful, definitive moment when a long, tiring journey officially ends, the heavy door swings softly open, and you are finally invited into the warm, protected sanctuary of the interior. As that heavy wooden door closes softly behind you, shutting out the damp chill of the fog, you enter a quiet, intimate space where the mind is free to roam. It was behind doors exactly like these, in the quiet, candlelit workshops of the early 16th century, that a Venetian printer named Aldus Manutius revolutionized the way humanity experiences rest and thought. Before him, books were massive, incredibly heavy, and rigidly chained to the sloped wooden desks of cold monasteries. Reading was a loud, public, and physically demanding task. But Aldus envisioned something entirely different. He created the octavo, the world's very first pocket-sized book. To make the text fit onto these small, elegant pages, he even invented the slanted, beautiful typography we now know as italics. For the very first time in human history, a person could hold an entire world of philosophy or poetry in the palm of a single hand. They could carry a book into the sunlight of a hidden garden, or bring it to the soft, quiet comfort of their bed. He took the immense, heavy burden of the knowledge and magically shrunk it down into an object of intimate, deeply personal comfort. It is a beautiful reminder that we have the power to take the massive, overwhelming narratives of our lives and scale them down, turning them into small, manageable and deeply comforting stories that we can hold gently in the quietest hours of the night. As the stories of the day naturally shrink down, becoming small and quiet, your body responds by sinking deeper into the soft support beneath you. The hands relax, the jaw softens, and there is absolutely nothing left that you need to carry. You can simply trace the edges of this peaceful feeling, much like tracing the intricate swirling covers of those ancient pocket-sized books. To protect his delicate creations, the Venetian bookbinders perfected the mesmerizing art of marmorizzazione, or marbled paper. To create this stunning material, an artisan fills a shallow rectangular vat with a thick, viscous bath of water and seaweed extract. Using specialized brushes, they gently flick drops of pure, brightly coloured pigments onto the surface, where the paint miraculously floats without dissolving. Then, using incredibly fine, wide metal combs, the artisan slowly, rhythmically draws lines through the floating colours, pulling the dots into sweeping infinite patterns of twisting spirals, peacock feathers, and rolling waves. Finally, a single sheet of blank paper is softly laid onto the surface, instantly freezing the fluid, chaotic movement of the water into a permanent, perfectly flat, and impossibly beautiful design. It is a breathtaking metaphor for the transition into sleep. We take the swirling, chaotic, and brightly coloured thoughts of our waking hours, and by simply letting them rest on the surface of our awareness, we gently capture them, turning the turbulence of the day into a smooth, flattened, and perfectly beautiful dream. The incredible ability to perfectly contain and freeze the movement of liquid colour was not limited to paper. It reached its absolute blinding pinnacle in the creation of the Pala d'Oro, the high altar screen of St. Mark's Basilica. While the grand ceilings above it are covered in millions of glass tiles, this golden altarpiece utilises an impossibly delicate microscopic technique known as cloisonné enamel. Master jewellers took a massive sheet of solid gold and painstakingly soldered hundreds of tiny hair-thin golden wires onto the surface, creating miniature raised walls that form the shapes of saints and angels. Into these tiny walled compartments they poured pure crushed coloured glass, deep sapphire, brilliant ruby, and cool oceanic emerald. When the piece was carefully heated in a roaring kiln, the glass melted into perfectly smooth liquid pools of colour, forever contained by the delicate golden borders. To look at it is to see light trapped in perfect miniature lakes of absolute clarity. It offers a deeply soothing architectural approach to our own complex emotions. We do not need to let every feeling bleed uncontrollably into the next. We can build tiny, beautiful, and deliberate golden walls within our minds, giving each joy, each memory, and each quiet thought its own safe, perfectly contained and illuminated space to rest. Stepping away from the golden interior glow of the altarpiece and back out onto the cool stone steps leading down to the grand, dark water of the canal, you will notice that the desire to create distinct, beautiful borders of colour extends directly into the lagoon itself. Driven deeply into the mud just outside the main doors of the grand palaces are the Palin de Casada, the iconic thick wooden mooring poles. Rather than leaving them as raw, weathering wood, they are intricately painted in vibrant, spiralling barber pole stripes. Today, they are a beloved, highly photogenic symbol of the city, but centuries ago they served a vital, profoundly comforting purpose. In a time when many of the boatmen traversing the waterways in the dead of night could not read the painted names on the walls, and the thick sea fog obscured the architecture of the buildings, these painted poles acted as customised visual lighthouses. Every noble family had their own, highly specific combination of colours. As a traveller rode slowly through the impenetrable dark, the sudden faint glow of their family's specific stripes catching the light of their lantern meant one deeply relieving thing. They had found their exact place in the sprawling labyrinth. They tell us that no matter how dark or confusing the waters become, we all have our own unique, vibrant markers, our core values, our deepest loves, that will always reliably, quietly guide us back to the place where we belong. Following the path of the water far past those painted poles, drifting away from the dense historic centre, we arrive at the very edge of the lagoon, where a long, impossibly thin strip of land called Palestrina shields the city from the sea. Here, the rhythm of life slows down to the pace of a single looping thread. In the late afternoon, as the sun casts long, amber shadows across the cracked pavement, the local fishermen sit quietly outside their brightly painted houses, entirely absorbed in the ancient meditative act of mending their heavy green fishing nets. They do not look at a massive torn hole in the net as a failure or a catastrophe. A tear is simply a natural expected consequence of working in the deep pulling currents of the sea. With rough hands and immense quiet patience, they use a small wooden shuttle to meticulously tie knot after knot, slowly restoring the complex geometric mesh. The work is perfectly repetitive, demanding absolutely no urgency, only steady, focused presence. To watch them is to absorb a profound, deeply forgiving lesson in restoration. We too experience natural wear and tear in the currents of our lives, and we do not need to view our frayed edges as a crisis. We just need to give ourselves the quiet time and the slow, patient grace to sit softly in the fading light, gently retying the knots and restoring the beautiful, resilient fabric of our energy. Just a short distance across the calm, darkening water from those mending fishermen lies a small, quiet island enclosed by heavy brick walls, a place that introduced a profound structural concept of rest to the entire world. This is the Lazaretto Vecchio, the site of the world's very first designated quarantine. While the word today often carries the weight of modern anxieties, its origin in the Venetian lagoon was rooted in the concept of the 40 giorni, a mandatory, protective 40-day pause. When ships returned from grueling years-long voyages across unknown, turbulent oceans, they were not immediately thrust back into the overwhelming, chaotic noise of the crowded city. Instead, the sailors were gifted a designated architectural interlude. They anchored in the quiet shallows of this island, completely isolated from the demands of society, simply resting in the sun and breathing the clean, salty air of the sea for 40 unhurried days. It was a mandatory period of decompression, a time to physically and mentally wash away the exhaustions of the long journey before re-entering the world. Sleep itself is our own daily, deeply protected quarantine, a designated, dark and silent island where we are naturally mandated to drop our anchors, isolate ourselves from the demands of the waking shore, and allow the quiet, cleansing tides of the night to completely restore our weary minds. As you settle deeper into this profound daily period of rest, allowing the air to move slowly and easily through your lungs, your breath becomes as smooth and clear as the final, most breathtaking creation of the Murano glassmakers. This is the art of vetro, a filigrana, or filigree glass. To create this impossibly delicate masterpiece, a master glassblower takes a completely pure, transparent cylinder of molten crystal and carefully embeds incredibly fine, opaque white threads of glass directly into its centre. While the glass is still glowing and fluid, they gently pull and continuously twist the material, stretching it out until the opaque white lines form a flawless, infinite, and perfectly spaced double helix suspended invisibly within the solid, clear walls. To look at a piece of filigrana in the dim light is to see what a captured, perfectly peaceful breath might physically look like. A delicate, swirling and infinite ribbon of air, frozen forever in a state of absolute, unbreakable clarity. It is the perfect visual anchor for your own descent into sleep. Just like those delicate white threads, your breath continuously spirals in and out, perfectly held and protected by the calm, clear, and unmoving structure of your resting mind, twisting softly downward into the deep, quiet, and flawlessly transparent center of the night. As the final, amber rays of 1,000 years of history sink completely beneath the dark, still mirror of the lagoon, we arrive at the most profound and quiet secret of this floating world. While we have marvelled at the grand marble palaces, the invisible forests of petrified oak, and the shimmering mosaics of gold, the final wonder of Venice is not something that was built by human hands. It is the miraculous elemental phenomenon of the riflesso, the reflection. Because this city is built at the exact delicate intersection of stone and water, it exists in a state of eternal, liquid duality. Every bridge, every arched window, and every weathered brick wall is continuously being painted onto the surface of the green canals. But the water does not merely copy the stone, it softens it. The ripples from a passing gondola or the gentle pull of the lunar tide take the rigid, unyielding reality of the buildings and break them into a million dancing, fluid and shimmering fragments. In the reflection, the heavy stone becomes weightless, the ancient becomes new, the solid becomes a dream. This is the city's final gift. It shows us that reality is not nearly as hard or as fixed as it often seems. There is always a softer, more fluid, and more beautiful version of our world dancing just beneath the surface, waiting for the water to grow still so it can finally be seen. As you lie here in the deep, velvet dark, you're much like the city at midnight. The busy, solid structures of your day have begun to dissolve into the quiet, rippling water of your subconscious. The sharp edges are melting, the weight is lifting. You're no longer the stone, you're the reflection, fluid, peaceful, and perfectly at rest. The journey through these 101 wonders is now complete, and the long winding path through the labyrinth of the lagoon has led you exactly where you were always meant to be. You have travelled across the bridge of straw and through the library of colour. You have felt the warmth of the alpine wood and heard the melodic warning of the rising tide. But now even those beautiful images can begin to softly fade. You do not need to remember a single date, a single name, or a single story. Like the salt mist rolling off the Adriatic, these facts have served their purpose, cooling the air and softening the world, and now they can simply evaporate into the night. Your body has become as heavy and as settled as the Istrian stone at the water's edge, perfectly supported, perfectly still. Every muscle in your face is smooth. Your shoulders have dropped away from your ears. Your hands are open and weightless. The city of Venice is sleeping now. The gondolas are moored, swaying in a rhythm that matches your own slow, effortless breath. The lions are silent. The bells have finished their tolling. There is nothing left to observe, nothing left to imagine, and nothing left to do. The water is perfectly still. The air is perfectly calm. You're drifting away from the shore of wakefulness, moving out into the vast, dark, and incredibly safe expanse of a deep and dreamless sea. Every breath you take is a gentle oarstroke, carrying you further into the warmth, further into the silence, further into the peace. You're submerged in the restorative, healing dark of the night, where time has no meaning and the world has no weight. You're safe, you're protected, you're home, and now 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.